All right, I think we can go ahead and get started with this afternoon's event. Welcome, everyone. Just a reminder, this is for the Great Lakes region of the EnergyTech University Prize Explorer event series. So quick preview of what you'll be seeing and hearing today are pitches from 11 companies that'll be presenting. And the winner announced today at the end of the webinar will receive a cool $3,000. And better yet, they'll have the opportunity to compete in the national event where they will be in the running to win a share of $100,000 in total prize money. So that's very exciting. It could definitely be a great start to incubate new ideas and have the funds and resources to start to flesh them out for some of the great ideas that we'll be hearing from today. Just to give everyone a sense of timing, it's 2 p.m. Central now. We're going to get through 6 pitches after the introductions from myself, my firm, and the judges are complete, and then have a quick 5-minute break, probably around 3 p.m. Central, maybe shortly after that. And then we'll have our second tranche of pitches after that, which will conclude around 4 p.m. Central. At that point, we'll have Kathleen Swan present for about 30 minutes on some of the mechanics and logistics of starting and incorporating a new company. And right around 4:30 Central Time, we anticipate, the deliberation from the judges to be concluded and for us to announce a winner here. Next slide. So my name is Shashank Chirkanti. I work as a venture associate at Evergreen Climate Innovations. We're a Chicago-based venture capital firm that specializes in seed stage investments for companies that are working in the sustainability space. So within the sustainability space, there are a variety of themes and sectors. We're not specializing in any of those, but we like to give every idea a careful look and a fair shake. We are uniquely structured as a nonprofit. So we are basically capitalized by philanthropic dollars instead of the normal LP investors that work with most venture capital firms. We believe this gives us a unique kind of approach and advantage to have very patient capital and not be held to certain payback timelines that allows us to work with our portfolio companies in a more optimal way. So far, we've been around for about 9 years. We have 42 portfolio companies in our purview, and every year we seek to invest in anywhere from 4 to 5 new companies. And then for we can go ahead and go to the next slide. So to give a quick preview of the pitches that we'll be seeing today, we'll start with Supercharge, kind of work our way down all the way to Carbon Busters, and then have a little break. And the second tranche, we'll start with Exogrid and then conclude with Watt Shift. So just to remind everyone, we intend to allocate 7 minutes for the pitch and then 3 minutes for Q&A from the judges. So, given that we have a lot of ideas and a lot of content to get through, we'll definitely do our best to kind of keep to that timeline. So if pitches are going long, I will probably step in just to remind everyone of the time and to make sure that we keep this going and have everyone out on time. So without further ado, I think we'll go ahead and introduce our slate of judges. So first up, I'd like to introduce Jordan Leventhal. Jordan, if you turn on your camera and introduce yourself.
Here we go. Hey, everyone. Jordan Leventhal. I am the SVP of product at Reactivate. Reactivate is a renewable energy project development company focused on serving low-income and environmental justice communities across the U.S. And it's a joint venture between utility-scale development firm Invenergy and impact investment firm Lafayette Square. My focus at Reactivate is leading our product team, which encompasses strategy, product management, customer origination, government and regulatory affairs, and strategic partnerships. And my background is previously at Invenergy, leading the emerging technologies team, where I focused on a range of technologies from green hydrogen to long duration storage, transmission, electric vehicles, offshore wind, and a host of other technologies. This is my second year judging this competition and was really blown away by the quality of all the pitches last year. So I'm really looking forward to hearing everybody's pitches today, and best of luck.
Awesome. Thank you, Jordan. Next up, we have Anubhav Kaushik.
Hi, everyone. I am Anubhav Kaushik, and I work at Marathon Capital. I'm a clean energy associate at Marathon, which is a renewable energy financing bank located headquartered out of Chicago. We only do deals in renewable energy and don't touch anything else. So all of us are very passionate about the clean energy transition here. Prior to that, I was an electrical engineer, and I worked at Siemens for 10 years in different roles. At Marathon, so far, I have focused on green hydrogen and electric vehicle charging infrastructure. So I'm really excited to be here. I actually also interned at Evergreen when I went to business school. So I'm really excited to come back as a judge. This is my first time experience, and I am looking forward to hearing all your pitches. Good luck.
Awesome. Thank you, Anubhav. Next up, we have Chairwoman Carrie Zalewski.
Hold on one second. Good afternoon, Carrie Zalewski. I chair the state's Public Utility Commission. Every state has a Public Utility Commission. And just as a basic level, I regulate utilities in the water, gas, and electric space to ensure reliable, least cost services to everyone in the state of Illinois. But in Illinois, we've been given new tools to help us meet our new clean energy goals under the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, or otherwise known as CEJA. And within that docket, we're also planning for the grid of the future. So there are dockets open before me where we're trying to figure out what we want and need the grid of the future to look like. And from my perspective and my vantage point, there are no shortages of problems to solve on the grid. To get us to a decarbonized grid, we need a lot of innovation. And so that's where you all come in. I'm really looking forward to hear about your ideas. We need all the good ideas. This is my first time judging. I have been to pitch sessions at other incubators in Chicago, and I'm really grateful to be here. I look forward to all of your ideas.
Awesome. Thank you. And last up, we have Karen Weigart.
Hey, everybody. My name is Karen Weigart. Just to echo the other judges, I'm thrilled to be here. I'm delighted to get a chance to hear everything that you all are working on. Quick background on me is I lead the Baumhart Center for Social Enterprise and Responsibility at Loyola University Chicago. And within that, we actually have an MBA program that's 100% focused on social and environmental impact. So the idea of building organizations to address the great challenges of our time with climate being front and center is key. A little bit of my background before that, I was the first chief sustainability officer for the city of Chicago. So delighted for those folks who are actually building businesses here, and also thrilled for those who are building them elsewhere. And I was also a founding board member of a company that is now part of Climate First Bank. So have had a chance to go from the earliest stages. So I'm really delighted to join here as a first-time judge, and looking forward to learning from everyone and to supporting the technologies and organizations of the future as we work on climate.
Awesome. Thank you, Karen. Yeah, I think everyone here at Evergreen is very excited to see and hear what the students have to say. And yeah, let's go ahead and get started with the first pitch. So first up, we have Supercharge. Please share your screen and present.
Hi, sorry, I have little tech issues.
All good.
Here we are. Okay, perfect. All right, is that working?
Yep.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And thank you to all the judges for being here. We really appreciate it. My name is Derek Craig. I'm here with the University of Chicago, as well as with ABE. One of our team members, Raghav, was unable to make it today because he was sick. So we'll be filling in for him as well. So for our technology, when we were deciding on what we wanted to focus on for providing renewable energy. We know that there is a very large focus on batteries and enhancing battery capacity, as well as solar and wind, but we wanted to take an alternative approach and look at other natural resources that were available. So our focus is on methane capture and production. So when we look at the current market for renewable energies, we know that the maximum battery capacity right now for solar wind is only 4 hours. And obviously in the market, that's a very restricting for overnight usage when there is no sun or no active wind. But one thing that's often overlooked is natural gas. When we think about this, we think about fracking or in terms of like oil production, the capture of natural gas there. But there are other methods of capturing methane, which we see through landfill production. And then Abe.
Thank you, Adira, and thank you all again for being here. So to share a little bit more about why liquefied natural gas is special relative to the other options, you see the other options always seem to lack something. For example, with coal, it seems like, again, there are more obvious disadvantages like the environmental disadvantages. And then you also have with solar, wind, and some of these other more renewable options, you have problems like intermittency in particular, and just trying to ensure a consistent generation. So you see the more details in this chart here, but I guess the key takeaway is that we think that at least in the foreseeable future, we think that liquefied natural gas can present a clear opportunity to basically advance and lead to a renewable energy transition. So we'll share more about why we think that we enhance the LFG process. Thanks, Frank.
So currently methane emissions come from a lot of man-made resources, specifically through the emissions of natural gas production and oil capture. But we also see it through other sources. One that probably comes to mind most frequently is manure or landfills. And this is a naturally occurring process. It's called methagenesis, where bacteria, anaerobic bacteria, is producing methane from decomposing carbonate material. So again, like I said, it's from natural and anthropogenic processes, but there are opportunities where we can capture it in both situations. But another important thing to keep in mind is methane is actually 25 times more potent than carbon dioxide. So when we're talking about harms to the environment, methane is something that seriously impacts not only the local communities, but when we're talking about greenhouse gas emissions overall. So the current systems, in order to capture methane, they're actually quite extensive system in the United States. We see around 650 operational methane capture facilities over landfills. So this looks like infrastructure that is covering landfills that is naturally capturing the methane that is being produced from this anaerobic bacteria. But the technology that we're focusing on actually enhances this capturing ability by producing more methane, by enhancing the chemical process, increasing output by 400%. So the technology we selected was from the Argonne Natural Laboratory. And essentially, when I say enhances the natural process, is we're introducing different chemical components that act as catalysts. So as we see in figure 2 on the slides here, this is the system that they have set up. So we're starting with a carbonous aqueous solution that has the landfill material that has the carbonate within it. But then by introducing it to various solutions that contain the bacteria, the anaerobic bacteria, as well as silicate, it speeds up this natural process by producing 5 times the output. And then as a byproduct, not only are we producing more methane that can then be captured and burned for energy, but it's also sequestering carbon. So we're taking this carbon that would have naturally been produced from this methanegenesis process and then putting into a carbonate. And it also produces limestone as a byproduct as well. So already, as I mentioned, there are current outreach programs for establishing methane capture and landfills, but there is a specific program within the EPA that encourages and provides resources, funding, materials for existing landfills to either construct or enhance their methane capture programs. Because again, as I said, methane 25 times more potent than CO2, and it's also a natural resource that's being produced that we could capture for energy that most of the time is being wasted.
Awesome. Thank you. So now to share a little bit more about how we plan to take this opportunity to market. We've decided to break this down into 4 different steps. So the first step is we want to work on the prototyping stage. We looked at the National Laboratory, and this is actually the state. And we also spoke with the people who created this patent and the product behind it, and right down there in the product's prototyping stage. So what we want to do is we want to at least find one partner. They want to implement this idea to 5x the methane production. And yeah, so that's the first step. And then the second step that we want to do is we just want to start finding more customers. And we want to do this through the LMOP program. And then we also another thing is we need to find like the product for this. So we believe we have supply chain connections maybe through Thomasnet, and we could probably just make to order this. So that's how we want to do customer acquisition mass production after we have the prototyping. And then after that, we would just like to expand to all the landfills and then just enter new markets. So first we're starting with landfills, but now there's a lot of future with farms, with wastewater treatment plants, et cetera. So basically, we're starting off also in a broad level with a very, very small TAM, like like maybe one landfill within this whole system, and maybe a few more landfills. And then we want to expand to many different markets at once. So that's effectively our go-to-market strategy with some details underneath. And then going on to a little bit more on the TAM side. So here's right now $28 million per year is the current electricity generable under these current methods, right? But with our product, as Adira was describing, we could actually 5x this because we're able to use the science that we have. And then we think that we could actually lead to 142 million in electricity that's able to be generated from all these landfill things, assuming that we're able to extract LFG from all the landfills. So in short, we think that there's a huge market opportunity, and this market opportunity only gets bigger after we expand beyond these markets. But in the short term, though, we have a clear, we believe that we have a clear way to target a slice of this.
All right, can you guys take 1 more minute to wrap up?
Yep.
Sure, we'll speed up here. So I guess just as a conclusion, again, we think that methane capture is a very underutilized market where this is existing. And although there's a lot of focus and energy on using renewables, we have to acknowledge the fact that as we transition away from fossil fuels into the renewable sphere, that we are going to need a reliable source of energy. And with this form of methane capture, not only is it beneficial to the environment because we're reducing emissions, improving air quality, but it's a reliable source that can be applied not only, like we said, to landfills, but expanded to wastewater treatment, manure, any other system that produces carbonous offset. So we really hope you guys consider this to not only as a benefit for environmental emissions reduction and capturing energy that's already being released, but also as a way that's economically feasible and can be applied to many areas and regions in the United States and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you. Judges, do you have any questions? All right, Carrie, feel free to go ahead and ask.
Yep. Okay. Really great job. Really exciting topic. You guys obviously know your chemistry really well, and you're absolutely correct about methane. There is still a lot of gas online throughout all of our grids throughout the nation. So absolutely, you definitely have your finger on the pulse there, and it's going to be that way for some time. And particularly, not every state has some of the new restrictions we have in Illinois. But my 2 questions are this. So you talk about, I want to hear more about the customer and the value to the customer. So you talked about landfills. What would be the impetus for them to sign up for this? Is it to meet some state goal on emissions? Is it maybe a corporate offset that they could sell? How is the value created for the customer? And then I want to ask a second, just because we're on Zoom, it's easier to drop 2 questions at once. You talked about the electricity that can be generated for the landfills. That's very exciting to me. My question is there emissions from that process? So I know you're taking the emissions off the landfill, but when you're using the methane to create electrons, is there emissions created in that process? Because there are some state restrictions there.
Yeah, so I guess to answer your first question in terms of what's the benefit for landfills implementing this, and that ties back to the electricity generation. So right now, landfills, we're just emitting methane among other gases as well, going into the atmosphere, producing no gain whatsoever. But by implementing this technology, whether that landfill already has the infrastructure that captures it and we can just increase their output, or by installing the infrastructure on a new landfill. So after it goes through the system outlined through the for lack of a better term, I guess, enhancer, by putting it through the chemical process of the different chambers, that would then be transited just to a combustion engine that is able to then burn the methane. And this answers part of your second question that, yes, it does emit CO2. However, again, when we compare the emissions impact of methane versus CO2, it's much, much more favorable to have that CO2 emission. And then by creating that electricity, that could be then sold to the grid, which would be the benefit for these landfills. So in addition to perhaps depending on the region, if there is environmental regulations on how much methane can be emitted, even for regions that don't have that regulation yet, there's still an economic benefit by converting this into electricity and selling it to the grid. And that's also why we wouldn't want to put it directly, although the methane that is produced is of a level like 90% pure to go into the pipeline, it would be easier to put this into regions because connecting, say, a landfill to the grid is much simpler, just building infrastructure wise than connecting it to the natural gas pipeline.
Great, thank you. Apologies, that's going to be all the time we have for questions for Supercharge, but thank you a lot for your presentation today.
Thank
and
you.
Best of luck.
Thank you.
So next up, we have the team from GridLink. I believe everyone is on. If you can go ahead and share your screen from the presenter. Awesome.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Joshua Silitz. I am the co-founder of GridLink, and I'm really excited to share our solution with you today. So in the next 6 years, the number of EVs on the road in the United States is expected to triple. This is being backed by massive government and private investments. We're talking about billions of dollars that are being spent to ensure the US transitions to exclusively EVs as soon as possible. Now, by the numbers alone, this is a once-in-a-century investment moment. 2 centuries ago, it was the railroad. Last century, it was the US highway system. This century, it is EVs and EV charging infrastructure. Now, this rapid transition does not come with its own unique challenges. The mass proliferation of EVs is expected to add 7% to peak grid load in the next 4 years, more than tripling the load caused by EVs today. This increase in demand is predicted to significantly affect the longevity of grid assets, such as transformers. And frankly, we're already seeing the impacts of this. In the last 6 months, for example, we've seen a Sacramento-based utility lose 4 transformers in large part due to increased EV charging on their grid. While the municipal utility in question had 3 backup transformers, they weren't able to replace one, meaning in certain areas, blackouts and brownouts will be more common. And at the end of the day, ratepayers are going to have to pay more to subsidize the cost of a new transformer, which probably won't come in for the next 18 to 36 months due to supply chain backups. Now, utilities are aware of this issue. Most have grid protection programs that incentivize charging at times that affect the grid the least. We see this with demand response programs and variable rate programs. On the other side of things, EV fleet owners attempt to take advantage of these incentives to minimize their operational costs through charging optimization. Just as you might avoid purchasing expensive airline tickets during the holidays, for example, a smart charger or charging management system might defer charging until later in the evening when prices would be lower. Now, even with these programs, though, these two groups do not communicate efficiently to provide the grid protection and to make use of the incentives, just because of how new of an issue EV charging management is. Introducing GridLink, a grid-aware EV charging management system for commercial fleets to minimize their load on the grid while reducing charging costs. Let's say it's a super hot day outside. Ambient temperatures are high in the middle of the summer and everyone's AC is blasting. The grid is already stressed. Now, come end of day, entire EV fleets will come back to their warehouses and charging stations to plug in and charge. But if the grid is already stressed, those cars plugging into charge could put the grid over the edge and damage assets. That is where GridLink comes in. We use grid congestion data to make sure that the grid isn't overloaded. And instead of charging right then and there, we'll optimize the schedule of those EVs to charge later when price is lower and the grid can handle it. Now, this was also just a stationary optimization example, right? With historical data, we are able to do route and locational optimization too. By optimizing charging based on an understanding of the real-time state of grid congestion and load, we're able to save up to 50% of a fleet's charging costs while improving their vehicle uptime. Now, while there are other companies looking to serve charging management to fleets, we are the superior solution for fleet operators simply because of our focus on grid health. Existing software currently works to optimize charging just from variable rate programs and existing load balancing programs without taking the real-time state of the grid into account. Now, by taking this into account, we are able to implement much more effective load balancing software. We can manage the routing and charging of fleets, benefiting both the grid and fleet operator. And while utilities inherently care for their grid assets, like transformers, they do not actively route their vehicles around stressed areas of the grid or directly incentivize vehicle charging elsewhere. This directly results in grid damage that we saw from the previous Sacramento example. So GridLink operates on a software as a service model, charging just a fraction of the potential monthly savings that we would be providing to a fleet. We charge a per vehicle, per month fee, competitive with similar management software, while offering superior cost reduction programs and while protecting the grid. With most operating costs coming from data ingestion, processing, and storage, the platform's costs are relatively low, allowing for fairly high margins. Now, here in Illinois, for example, the average non-workforce EV costs roughly $315 to run per month. And with our estimates of saving 40 to 50%, we would be charging less than 1/10 of the savings that we would be providing to a fleet. So our beachhead market is electric utility fleets. We are currently working on partnering with the Illinois utility ComEd to launch a pilot program. Our team has already met with the manager of fleet operations there, who liked our concept and is actively connecting us with the relevant departments. We currently believe that the total onboarding process will take roughly 8 months, followed by a 6-month pilot simulation program, so that we can prove certain success metrics that we believe are very achievable. Following this, we will deploy live on ComEd systems with their current fleet of 450 vehicles that will grow to 1,600 EVs by the year 2030, and begin expanding to non-utility fleets in their service area, such as government fleets, Lion Electric, and FedEx, just to name a few. From there, we will also begin to reach out to additional utilities in states that have the highest EV adoption rates. In California alone, there is a total EV fleet of 20,000 vehicles set to be electrified by 2030, between just 2 utilities that we have targeted. With a superior product, utility partnerships, and competitive price, we plan to be a significant chunk of the charging services market, which McKinsey estimates to be worth $15 billion per year by 2030.
Okay, thank you guys.
Sorry, one sec, real quick, just to cover team. Our student team of researchers is from the University of Chicago and Illinois Tech. We are uniquely positioned to take advantage of this emerging opportunity. We have highly skilled software engineers from companies such as AWS and extensive industry knowledge in the power systems industry from companies such as ComEd. We have additional industry knowledge and relationships through our board of advisors, who are industry leaders and nationally recognized experts that have been assisting us in developing a business case for our technology. With our backgrounds and our advisory board, we are the team that is going to be responsible for the smooth transition to exclusively EVs being able to charge on the United States power grid. Thank you so much. I'd love to take any questions.
Awesome. Great pitch. Judges, any questions? Go for it.
Yeah, I have a question. Hi, Josh. This was very informative. Especially, I like the first customer that you're targeting, which is electric utility fleet. I'm curious about when you are aiming to expand this, like your customers. So companies like Forum Mobility, which recently, were in the news for raising a lot of money, they intend to, lease trucks, electric vehicle, heavy duty trucks, and also deploy their own charging infrastructure, not to mention have their, build their own solar plants so they can provide that electricity. How do you plan to, and this is specifically the need because of California, like you mentioned, it has to be, the fleet has to be upgraded to EV by, I think, 2030 or 2024. So how do you expand beyond your utility fleets? How do you get to those clients that are also competing and developing their own software system?
Totally, that is a great question. So like I mentioned, electric utility fleets are a beachhead market for us, right? By initially partnering with an electric utility, we get additional congestion data that those companies that you were mentioning simply do not have. We would be able to provide just a superior product to non-utility fleets in that service area because of our understanding of grid load. It allows us to not only just be more effective when doing charging optimization, but it also gives us the ability to create a line of communication between non-utility fleets and the utilities that serve them, to create better load balancing programs, which other charging management systems that don't have that data and don't have that partnership simply cannot do. And so it's definitely a beachhead market.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Karen,
Karen?
do you have a question? Go for it.
Sure, thank you. And thank you for this introduction and the concept you're developing. I'd love it if you could share just a little bit more about what makes the actual technology unique, what you're differentiating.
Sure. So if we go back here, yeah. Like I said, charging management systems currently exist, right? But they aren't dynamic with how they are trying to balance out the grid. Sometimes they're not even trying to balance out the grid. They're just working to make sure that cars are charged when they need to be, right? That's a lot of charging management currently. The ones that are trying to do load balancing or demand response software, they don't take into account the state of the grid. And so what they do is they have an assumption that peak load is, when people come back from work, it's between 4 and 7 p.m. And so they incentivize charging at times that aren't that, right? What that means, however, is once you're incentivizing everyone to charge, middle of the day, then that can become peak load, right? If you are simply telling them to charge when it is not what you believe to be peak load, then you're just kind of creating a new peak load. You don't have that dynamic ability to incentivize charging at different times based on the state of the grid. That is really what we provide, a very dynamic demand response. I hope that answered your question.
All right, thank you guys. Yeah, thanks for presenting. It was a great pitch. I think obviously the problem that you guys are trying to solve is one that needs to definitely be solved prior to EV market penetration being able to make too much of a dent into the greenhouse gas reduction, but also the electrification of transportation. So it's a good problem to be working on, and we're very excited to see where it goes.
Thanks.
Next up, we have Aided out of Michigan State. All right, awesome.
All right, hello everybody. Thank you for that warm welcome. I am Evan Rue, and this is Ross Davis, and we are Aided at MSU.
Aided is an undergraduate research team funded through NASA's University Student Research Challenge, and we are bringing a solution for drone delivery. So drone delivery is a huge idea right now, but it presents several problems. UAVs have an annoying buzz. They're limited in range due to their battery technology. In an urban area, their flight paths have a lot of obstacles, and then they have expensive operation costs. What Aided is doing is we're pairing two technologies for a solution. The first being, we plan to land, latch, and charge delivery drones on existing transportation vehicles to get closer to the delivery destination. What this looks like is an infrared beacon on that latch on the right side will beckon the drone to land. The cone shape will center it in place, and the ejecting bars will secure it to the vehicle. Along with the latch, we have Atlas, which is will automatically generate the autonomous mission files for the drone. And then using the Google Maps API, it'll store information on how to get to the bus stop on time, when to get off. And let me stress that when we take the human out of building these flight plans, we're saving a lot of time, especially in these missions that have multiple steps. So Aided is targeting 3 customers as a basis: drone manufacturers to increase capability, the drone operators as a way to save on operational costs, and then urban transportation as a way to create a passive revenue stream.
So the space that we're entering with these two products combined is a market that's still very early in its development. So there's a lot of room for us to get in and create our niche and capture our market share. As Ross just mentioned, we're targeting 3 main players who are in this space, and each of them get to benefit in their own unique ways. So starting with urban transportation modalities, we get to create a new unrealized revenue stream in the form of leasing space on top of the transportation modalities. So once our infrastructure is installed, we can then incentivize this space to be leased out. And on the backside, we get to capture a brand new distribution channel. As far as the drone logistics companies goes, we will be selling the latches that attach to each drone, which then hook onto the infrastructure already installed on each bus, which captures a good amount of top line revenue for us. Now, both of these combined and put together create a lot of value for these third-party labor drone operators in the way of increasing the capacity for them to focus more drones at once, which in turn cuts the labor costs, which currently accounts for 95% of the projected cost per drone delivery. So with each of these 3 put together, there is large opportunity within the market, still early in its development. As far as our marketing strategy goes, this year we are putting really heavy emphasis on research and design, business development, as well as securing our spot in this space in the form of a patent. By 2025, we're looking to solidify each of our partnerships with both the urban transportation companies and modalities that we've been speaking to, as well as the drone logistics companies who are actually making the delivery product. In addition to this, we're also looking to achieve and finalize our manufacturing strategy to make our products a bit more affordable so that we can sell them at a lower cost and make our product a bit more attractive. By 2028, we project that our infrastructure will be fully installed on the urban transportation modalities and that we can begin generating top line revenue from our drone companies as well. So our cutting edge technology is really going to generate quite a bit of impact within this space. First things first, with a reduced number of flights and the time of each flight, we're really going to reduce the amount of maintenance required and the frequency of maintenance for each drone. Additionally, our technology is going to enable about twice as many flights per battery life, which will reduce the frequency of charging, the demand for large batteries per unit on each delivery drone, and the demand from the power grid of the urban area in which the drone operates. I think a really good thing to point out here is that a large issue within the drone industry at the moment is the noise pollution and the safety of the citizens in which the delivery drones operate. And this solution is effectively going to cut both of those out as flights will be shorter and you won't have as many safety concerns with them flying over cities in its entirety. Additionally, one other thing I'd like to point out is that Atlas is going to enable the capacity of the third-party labor drone operators capacity to increase and cut labor costs by over 35%. And this is going to be a huge benefit and a value driver for our idea when it hits the market.
Great, thank you, Evan. So just some more final notes to incentivize our solution. We have submitted a patent through MSU that is specifically with making deliveries on public transportation, and we're currently looking to expand that with recent inventions. We're utilizing precision landing tools and existing optimization functions to create reliability and functionality. And then additionally, with the 2 years of time that we've spent in the research and development on this, we've been able to spend time validating and doing analysis to confirm that this is a viable solution. And finally, we have interest from the industry players, right? Blue Flight being a delivery drone company, NASA, who saw the solution as a mobility and an energy solution, and then finally EnergyTech, which is an autonomous bus manufacturer that we plan to do a demonstration with later this school semester.
So thank you, everyone. Once again, we are aided at MSU. We are a 15-person research team here, delivering solutions and hopefully going to market with them. We are led by an amazing advisor in Dr. Lee, and we look forward to fielding your questions. Thank you for your time.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thanks so much for the presentation. This is a really interesting concept and something that I definitely never thought about. So I really appreciate that. I had two quick questions. One is, can you speak a little bit to the types of companies that would contract for your service and the types of packages, size and weight that you could deliver on this? And second, what regulations might you be subject to, either federal, state, or local?
Yeah, I'll take the first part of that.
Go
So in terms of the size of package, is kind of dependent on the vehicle that we sell it to. You can see behind us, we have a delivery drone, and that can carry a 14 by 14 by 12 inch package. But this is really just used for our validation. Our vehicle can also carry 20 pounds with the package pouch that we have built. But looking forward to the FAA regulations, the vehicles that we sell, or the companies that we sell to, they are responsible for certifying their vehicles. So that would kind of happen within them. Like, we are not trying to sell the drone, we're trying to sell the latch. So we're probably going to be a little bit more subject to the local regulations and working with the bus companies in general.
And so I think another really interesting use case of our product would be medical equipment, especially in urban areas in which it needs to get to a hospital or someone in need of an EpiPen really quickly. We have several market segments, and that would be a really good example and just a quick use case of the actual application of like of an industry that could really see benefit from this product.
Thanks.
I think we have time for one more question. Is there any available? Oh, I guess not. But thank you for your time, guys. And yeah, I think, this is an area in which I feel like we can see a lot of advancement, particularly within our country. If you look at places like what Zipline has done in Rwanda, I think is a really high profile example of the applications that can come from drone delivery. So it's a super exciting space to be in, and yeah, good luck.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.
For sure. Let's go ahead and give our judges about, a little bit of time to complete their evaluations. And then if the team from electronic water softener can queue up, that'd be very helpful.
Can you just tell me when you're ready for me to get started?
Yeah, sure. Let's give them about maybe 10 more seconds. Yeah, go for it.
All right, well, thank you guys for coming. My name is Matt Ilkmer, and my sister is my partner. She is Elizabeth Ilkmer, and we're both from Michigan State University. I'm here to do adaptations to a electric water softener. Let's see here. One of the main issues with using water for anything is scale. Scale is caused by what is called hard water, and it causes a hard casing to collect on the inside of pipes. This can lead to reduction in the amount of water that can flow through the pipes. Hard water is made hard by what excess calcium carbonate in the water, and it has a saturation limit, the amount of calcium carbonate it can hold before it drops out and creates scale. And when it does drop out and attach to pipes or anything that is flowing through, it causes a very tightly bound crystalline structure to form. When the excess calcium carbonate is taken out of the water, it's called soft or softened water, and this is the traditional method, and it requires salt function. But another way is an electronic water softener, and that neutralizes or interrupts the crystalline structure. While this is not strictly soft water, it's still called a water softener. According to our research, the annual market in 2017 was $2 billion, and that has steadily increased and is en route to be $3.5 billion by 2025. Of that, 60% of it is in the residential market, this being homeowners either in a rural or urban living. And then of that 60%, another 60% of that is softened via the traditional method that requires salt. That leaves $360 million to $630 million being spent on a yearly basis on non-traditional water softening. mostly electronic water softeners. Now let's talk about how a traditional water softener works. Inside of the exchange where the water flows, there's resin that collects the excess calcium in the water and replaces it with salt. When the resin is filled with calcium, the softener backwashes water and salt through to dislodge the collected calcium and deposit it into the drain. This wastes water during the backwash stage. One of the problems with this kind of softener is it places salt into the water, which is neither environmentally friendly, and consumption of that water can then lead to health issues. Some of the other issues is it's not friendly for a handyman just to set up himself. You have to call somebody, and the entire unit is comparably expensive. The main reason to choose this as an option is it is completely 100% without a doubt effective because it completely removes any hint of scale causing calcium. On the other hand, you have electronic water softeners. These use nothing more than electricity to stop the scale from forming, opposing to traditional means. These softeners don't take out the extra calcium. Instead, they disrupt the normal formation of the crystals on the sides of the pipe and instead cause the calcium to crystallize against itself while still flowing in the water. They do this by creating a fluctuating magnetic field around the pipe with flowing water that interacts with the charged calcium particles, leaving them neutralized. The issues with these softeners is the effectiveness is not 100% guaranteed due to not removing calcium. The effectiveness also relies on how strong the magnetic field is, as well as how fast the water is flowing. All these softeners on the market today use a stationary field achieved by wrapping wire around the pipe. The issue with this is the center of the pipe is where the field is the weakest, once again causing effectiveness issues. The main pros of this style of softening is it's very easy for a handyman homeowner to set up themselves without outside help, since no pipes need cutting. They also tend to be significantly cheaper, as well as more environmentally friendly with no water waste or salt usage. This is an illustration of what the magnetic field looks like at the moment. The blue signifies the water in the pipe, and the black lines signify what the magnetic field is doing. Because of how magnetic fields work, the center of the field, which is also the center of the pipe, has no field in it, and so it's got the weakest treatment there. This is an illustration of what we are suggesting that you do. In this case, you have two rods that are creating a magnetic field on either side of the pipe, and the magnetic field is amplified in the center of the pipe where the most water flows. Another benefit is with the two fields is they actually amplify the quality of treatment, since you have two that are amplifying each other. These are some of the companies that are selling on the market today. We only included companies that sell the electronic water softeners, not traditional softeners. I've listed some that sell commercially and some that sell residentially, but in every case, there is no one that sells this sort of improved field in a residential setting. Now let's look at what everything costs. A traditional water softener costs at the low end $350. This is just for a single line portable softener, and they go up to $4,000 or more that will treat entire houses. Then you run into fees that aren't obvious from the sales price, mainly installation fees. These are incurred because traditional softeners are not friendly to a homeowner installer. On top of all that, you'll spend another $20 to $35 a month on electricity and salt, depending on how much water you use. An electronic water softener, on the other hand, you can buy on Amazon and easily set up for yourself for no money. It costs between $125 to $450. If you search around, you can find others that cost more, but these are less easily accessible and they do the exact same thing. Because it has a really minimal draw of electricity, you can expect to spend less than $5 a month on upkeep, and in most cases, even less than that. For the unit that we are suggesting with the added improvements, I think we could easily be at the top end of the market and sell it for $450. Especially as a startup, the production cost would be significantly higher than an established business, as well as needing to spend more on marketing. Because of that, we are suggesting we sell it on the high end and see how the market responds. Rough pricing of what it would take to have someone build this is $450 a unit. This is based off of similar products that have been built in the past. For example, the circuit board may not have the same function, but it's roughly the same size and has similar components. There will be some fluctuation in the actual building price, but it should stay near the estimate. And if we can sell the unit for $450, that means we make about $300 per unit and can use that to further marketing campaigns and future growth. The main people that would benefit from this is the consumers, because they get more say in the program and reduce costs on every front. Plus they get the added benefit of helping the earth, which is the second beneficiary. The earth benefits from cleaner waters and less waste, as well as having less carbon released during production. While one person contributions may seem insignificantly small, reductions in individual families' resource usage can have a massive impact when multiplied over millions and billions of families. Think like when we made the switch from from a normal light bulb to an LED light bulb. The last big beneficiary is the business owners and associates. This is not just the people with ownership rights in the business that make a bunch of money. It's also the employees with sweat equity that you're paying their families and you're paying their wage, as well as other businesses down the line that provide some product or service that also make money. Then if the business is successful, the excess money can be spent on creating the next thing to further create better consumer livelihood and a cleaner, healthier earth. Thank you all for listening. I will now take some questions.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. This is really informative. I have one question for you about your channel strategy. Like, how do you plan to sell this product? Would it just be on Amazon? And in that case, how would you educate your new clients, like why this is better than what's out there in the market? Or do you intend to partner up with like developers who are building houses or apartments and have it like pre-installed? Like, what would be the channel strategy to sell this?
So I should have talked about this a little bit more, I guess, but Amazon is a good place to start. But there's also two other places that I want to hit. I want to take it to brick and mortar stores such as Ace Hardware and get them to stock it on the shelves where you can have people actually see the product and interact with it and learn more about it. And then I also want to talk to people that install homes like you were talking about, because as well as like plumbers and those kind of people, because they have that knowledge and they can pass that on to the homeowners.
Got it. Thank you.
We have time for one more question.
You mentioned that the solution preserves water. Can you elaborate on how it does that and how much water it preserves versus the alternative?
So I mentioned how a traditional water softener backwashes water, because how it works is it collects the calcium in this container, and then it has to flush that calcium out to refill the holding space in the container. And so it wastes water when it's flushing that calcium out and sending it back into the wastewater. This doesn't have any flushing necessary, and so it doesn't waste that water. And it really depends on how much it preserves, because for any given home, you have a different amount of time that's required between flushes of the water softener. But a full home water softener, you're probably looking at 20 to 50 gallons every time it flushes. And I think a normal family does about once a week, maybe.
Thanks so much.
Got it. Thank you. Okay, so I think we'll go ahead and give the judges a little bit of time to fill out their resultant surveys. Next up, we have Second Life. So the team can go ahead and share their screen and get situated. We'll give the judges a little bit more time.
So I'm going to check, make sure you can see my slides.
Yep, we can hear you loud and clear, and we see your slides. All right, why don't we go ahead and get started?
All right, thank you. My name is Edmund Post, and we are Second Life from Northwestern's Kellogg School of Management. We are upcycling plastics utilizing a technology from Argonne National Lab. So this uses high heat to increase plastic recycling efficiency. We will license this process to waste management firms for their recycling plants. The outputs of this process include carbon nanotubes and carbon black, which are essential to the energy transition. Presently, carbon black and carbon nanotubes are made from petroleum and then utilized in lithium-ion batteries, car tires, paints, and other products. We, using our process, will be able to create these same materials from a cleaner source while also eliminating waste. It'll be a waste to value type company. The expected carbon black and carbon nanotube markets are both huge, but also presently very dirty. The expected market for carbon black is to reach 23 billion by 2026, And then carbon nanotubes, 103.2 billion by 2030. These are globally. And then globally, there are 5 trillion plastic bags used per year, with less than 1% being recycled. They're ending up in landfills and in the ocean and not being utilized at all. As companies start to think of their full scope emissions, we will be able to help them lower their impact. Right now, plastic production is exponentially increasing with no forecast of slowing down and less than 10% being recycled here in the US. We have run out of landfill space and have been shipping our waste to other countries, but they are starting to say no more. Just this past week, Thailand has announced that they will no longer take any more plastic waste from any other countries. Plastic recycling has actually declined over time because of how inefficient and costly the process is. With our process, efficiencies and the value of those outputs will greatly increase. We will be able to make plastic recycling valuable again. These inefficiencies in recycling are due to sorting requirements and then limits on fumes from combustion. There's not a good process to divide up and sort the plastic and get rid of it effectively. Now to the numbers. We will have 2 sources of revenue: a licensing royalty, which is a 10% royalty paid proportional to output. For carbon nanotubes, our revenue would be $10 per kilogram, and for carbon black, $3 per kilogram. These are based upon current industrial scale market numbers. And then service contracts, where we will provide different services to the waste management firms, starting with just basic design support, install support, all the way up to premium management of the process, management of vendor relationships, and then maintenance contracts as well. In terms of equipment, plants would need to do a retrofit, which would be installing a reactor and a tank that would operate at 700 degrees Celsius. So it is a high heat type of process. Each time the process runs, this would be recycling 250 kilograms of plastic with an output of around 100 kilograms of carbon. This can then be mixed with cobalt to create the carbon nanotubes. If one 350 gallon reactor were to operate for a full day on 3 shifts, these are the amounts that it'd be able to produce. It's carbon nanotubes enough to power 100 lithium ion EVs for their batteries, 10 hydrogen fuel cells, or 250 car tires. And this would also be recycling 2 tons of plastic waste. This would be a 2.28 ton reduction of CO2, or equivalent of a car taken off the road for 6 months. We are turning waste into value to help create EV batteries and cleaner car tires. In terms of potential impacts for the environment as well, we're avoiding emissions from raw material extraction, avoiding emissions from processing, and then we're landfills as well. Right now, landfills are a huge offset or off-taker of methane. And we are also reusing carbon-based plastics indefinitely rather than just that one-time value. The big picture. Every year, if we were to run full bore 3 shifts a day for a year, the annual expected revenue per reactor would be around $3 million for the company. If successful and able to recycle just 1% of addressable US plastic, revenues would actually exceed $400 million. Right now, plastic recycling is not economical for recyclers. They are just not doing it. The largest recycler in the world is Waste Management here in the Midwest, and they are recycling around 500,000 tons out of the 14 million tons that are developed every year in the US. Second Life can help them make it economical and help them make it profitable. The environmental impact would be around 730 metric tons of plastic recycled per reactor annually, and enough lithium-ion battery production to operate 36,500 EVs, and 832 tons of CO2 reduction. We could make a healthier, cleaner, more efficient world, all by using waste plastic. In terms of next steps, right now this is a pilot out of Argonne National Lab. There would need to be funding via grants and other partnerships, a demonstration site, a commercial pilot, and then we would have to license that technology to our partners. Eventually, I foresee and we foresee a great market in emerging markets. Right now, plastic has ended up in other countries. It is not staying here in the US or in Western countries. We see that we could develop a great economy around recycling using this process. And then we would need specification approval with battery manufacturers, tire manufacturers, et cetera, so that we can help our customers really profit and find that most value. In terms of resources, like I've mentioned, we need funding, but then also staffing. We need engineering staff, sales staff, business development, applications engineering, amongst others. Thank you. Any questions?
Great, thanks.
If you want me to, yep. This is really exciting. I love that there is a new stream created out of garbage. I love that it solves a problem much needed in the lithium ion supply chain bottleneck. But my question is, can you speak more about running these recycling plants? Is part of your assessment of the costs take into consideration acquiring the land? I know you're retrofitting plants, and you said it's a high heat process, and those things, they require a lot of permitting, and it depends on what state you're in. It depends on all these things. Have you done any of those type of assessments?
So we've done a little bit. So that is, I would say, the major question right now. So Waste Management, who we've done most of our research based upon, they have already implemented some plastic recycling processes actually here in the Chicagoland area recently, where they are using a higher heat type process as well. But it's a high heat process. It's going to require energy. It's going to require land. So that is the biggest question, is how do you go about making that retrofit?
Thanks.
And Carrie, feel free to ask your question.
Yeah, thank you. And this question is related actually to the last one, and that is, when you're thinking about the process, do you need a very specific feedstock, and is that feedstock already created in the current recycling processes?
So this is one of the biggest benefits, I would say, is that the feedstock can be pretty broad. It is any polyethylene type plastics. So all of the prototyping was done using plastic bags, like grocery store plastic bags, but the process could be spread out past there. But there's enough plastic in plastic bags where it would take us a while to need more feedstock.
And is that separated out by the current recycling system? So can you just get plastic bags? Or is that a step that someone else needs to take so you can actually get it?
So right now it's mostly not being collected because nobody wants to recycle it. So that would need to start being collected again. Right now, because it doesn't get recycled, the recycling plants just don't take it, and so it goes to a landfill. But there are grocery stores out there who do recycle plastic bags as much as they can. It would be a process to get that going again and start that marketing process.
Got it. Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
We have time for one more question if any of the judges have it, but if not, we can go ahead and move to the last pitch for this tranche. Okay, thank you, Edmund.
Thank you.
All right, so let's go ahead and give the judges a quick minute here, and then Carbon Busters will be next.
Can you see my slides okay?
Yep, we can see you and hear you well. Okay, we can go ahead and get started.
Okay, thank you. Greetings, we are Team Carbon Busters. Our algae oil feedstock converts carbon into carbon negative biofuel. In 2022, our team completed national ICOR, thus 204 customer interviews verified this information. I'm Neha Shakili with my teammates Sharon Hughes, Amanda Lopez, and George Zhao. Here's our story. Our solution achieves 3 metrics in US DOE SBIR proposal due at midnight. Starting left, metric 1 is achieved as our customers will replace diesel with renewable diesel. For metric 2, we provide 2 times the carbon reduction at 140%. And for metric 3, taxpayers prefer $130 per ton carbon taxes paid in rather than $100 per ton carbon tax subsidies paid out to status quo projects. Here's how it works. Step 1, we capture carbon by growing algae. Step 2, our patented process extracts oil for step 3, our algae oil feedstock. Step 4, our algae oil is sold to our customers who make step 5, renewable diesel, which is sold at truck stops for medium and heavy duty trucks. They accounted for 7% of US carbon emissions in 2022. The following slides are the evaluation statements in the official rules. Our patented technology produces carbon negative algae oil feedstock via cost-effective extraction of oil from algae. Here's how it works starting left. The input is algae. Step 1, algae will be infected with a virus, which will cause step 2, virus replication. Step 3, the virus is killed, and step 4, the algae oil is extracted. The output is our product, carbon negative algae oil feedstock. 2 is market. Customers will be 9 of the top 10 renewable diesel producers operating in the US, as they expressed interest in buying our product during ICOR customer interviews. So, why buy our algae oil feedstock? Because our price is the lowest and carbon reduction is the highest. And shown left, it enables our customers to sell to an untapped $15 billion market with a 2 billion gallon per year shortage of carbon negative renewable diesel. Algae oil feedstock is a commodity, so it is interchangeable with other oil-based feedstocks. The competition is a price versus carbon reduction trade-off. The top 10 algae oil producers are shown left. Their prices are too high from $10 and $12 per gallon, but they're carbon negative with a carbon reduction of 120 to 105%. The 3 existing oil-based feedstocks shown right are waste, soybean, and corn oil. Their prices are lower from $7 to $750 per gallon, but they're carbon positive with a carbon reduction of 60 to 20%. Our algae oil will be lower price at $650 per gallon and higher carbon reduction at 140%. Over to you, Amanda.
Thank you, Nia. 3 is economic feasibility. On the left is our estimate. Price is $6.50 per gallon. Cost is $5 per gallon for an EBITDA of $1.50 per gallon. So profitability metrics are 23% EBITDA margin and 30% equity IRR. Shown right, these metrics enable our 5-year unicorn strategy, meaning $1 billion company, from 7 biorefineries built in 5 years. Details in Q&A. 4 is impact. We engineer our algae biorefinery to be a beacon of hope around the world by providing equal opportunity jobs and prosperity while capturing carbon. From left to right, for our beneficiaries, 1 algae biorefinery will create 1,500 jobs. And ladies, who wants equal pay? We do. That's why our first algae biorefinery will be the world's first gender equal biorefinery, meaning 50% women will receive equal pay. Finally, 1 algae biorefinery will capture 5 million metric tons of carbon over 25 years. Our role in the energy transition is to help the disadvantaged. Starting with biorefinery number 1 in Belle Glade, Florida, 1,500 jobs will reduce the unemployment rate by 70%. Next, unicorn status means biorefineries up to 7, creating 10,500 total jobs. 2 more unicorns means biorefineries 8 to 21, creating 21,000 more jobs. And biorefinery 22 and beyond expands our biorefineries across the world. So, why 3 unicorns? Because the carbon capture annually by 21 biorefineries in the US is equal to the carbon offset in 2021 by 100% of EVs in the US. So now, 5 is our business plan. Shown left, the definition of success is to achieve project development deliverables, which we have done many times as we are biorefinery project development experts. Step 1, We prove our patent by securing SBIR grants. Step 2, we will secure project finance. And step 3, we will build and operate algae biorefinery number 1. Shown right, people and other resources are also project development deliverables. And here, we agree with Nestle that cooperation is the key to achieving success, as shown between our people and other resources. Finally, our revenues are from product sales and not from US taxpayers. So, which 5 million metric ton carbon capture project would the US taxpayers prefer? Left is a status quo project, which is a tax taker of $500 million over 25 years. This project is not viable without subsidies. On the brighter side, our algae biorefinery project is a taxpayer of $650 million over 25 years. Conclusion, our biorefinery is viable without subsidies, and it's highly profitable. Thank you, and we welcome your questions.
Thank you. Awesome pitch.
Thank you.
Thanks, Neha and Amanda, for your pitch. I have a question regarding your cost structure. So you said your cost structure is, it costs you $5 to make this, I guess, per gallon. My question is, are you growing your own algae? Like, is that a water intensive process for you, or are you just procuring it? Like, how are you keeping your cost at $5? Help me understand that.
So we are planning to grow our, like as we mentioned in the presentation, we want to open our first biorefinery in Belgrade, Florida. And this is like a coastal region where algae is native. And we will be growing our own algae at that specific location. And even we have done some background study to see and optimize our locations for future biorefineries as well. So the algae will be grown locally, and that's why our cost is lower. And algae is native to those areas. So we will not require any additional water resources and water inputs. We have taken into account all the resources that are required for the process.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question as well. I can't tell if someone else is trying
Go
to. Yeah, really, really interesting concept. And I love that you've thought about all these things and thought about equitable opportunities. That's wonderful. I want to hear about requirements for changes in infrastructure. So you talked about how it's interchangeable with a lot of other fuel types, but would there be any other considerations, whether it's to an internal combustion engine or pipes or pumps? Do you know how this might interact with the current infrastructure?
Chemically, the product that comes out of our algae or any biofuel for that matter is chemically similar to the ones that comes from fossil fuels. So we can run the current existing engines with the biofuels. So for example, right now in the field of aviation, we have biojet fuels, which have you can there has been test runs done by using 100% biofuel on jet engines, and they work fine. So we don't have to change any kind of infrastructure or anything in the vehicle to put in our biodiesel or biofuels. We can directly use the existing infrastructure.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. I think this concludes the first set of presentations. So we will go ahead and take a 5-minute break. So at 3:20 Central Time, we will go ahead and begin with the second group, which starts off with ExoGrid. So see you all in 5 minutes. Thanks. All right, welcome back, everyone. That was a quick 5-minute break, but I'm sure we're all excited to get started with the second tranche of pitches. So we'll go ahead and start with ExoGrid. We have someone from the team. Awesome. Thank you, Harry.
No problem. Can you hear me and see my screen?
Yep, got you loud and clear, and we see your screen.
Great. Hello, my name is Harry Crowley. I'm here with David Like and Trevor Hutt from Notre Dame, and we are called ExoGrid. We want to talk to you about DC transmission across time zones. The problem we're facing is of supply and demand. Our electricity supply is becoming more renewable, has been for years, and it's going to do so at a greater pace now that $500 billion have been put aside in the form of the Inflation Reduction Act to put towards making the grid completely renewable in less than 20 years. As it becomes renewable, it has become unreliable. Fossil fuels can be dispatched as they are needed and burnt when required. But as renewables come on the grid, we lose control of our energy sources. In the Golden State this year, 2/3 of electricity came from sources that cannot be controlled. This, among other things, is leading to the final point, that it's becoming expensive. According to the US Bureau of Labor and Statistics, across the country, electricity prices went up 14% compared to last year. To put that in perspective, that's a bigger rise between 2022 and 2023 than between 2012 and 2022. The forecast of 8% next year is a very conservative one. The second part of the problem is demand. Demand is a human feature and we have a lot more control over it, but there are still some problems in our electricity demand. Firstly, 1/10 of all electricity goes towards air conditioning. And because all our homes tend to get hot at the same time, air conditioning spikes in the late afternoon, leading to stresses on generator capacity and leading to big peaks in demand. This is only going to get worse as climate change exacerbates how hot it is in those homes. Earlier in September of 2022, engineers at Southern California Edison had to send out warnings to homeowners, begging them to turn off their air conditioning in the late afternoon as they fear that the grid would become unstable. So the question is, currently, does supply meet demand? The answer is no. A solar curtailment is when the sun is shining and yet a solar farm is told to turn down their panels and inverters because there is no demand in that moment. You can see in this graph data from CAISO, the California Energy Regulator, showing all the curtailments month on month. Last year in 2022, there were 2.4 terawatt hours, which is enough to power the country of Madagascar, wasted. That's solar arrays that were constructed and built, but were asked to turn off for the crucial moment. We don't know about the yellow, which is the forecast for curtailments this year, but we do know that 4.2 more gigawatts of solar panels have been put up in the state. So we can guarantee that there will be an increase in curtailments. A lot of people are looking to storage solutions, but they don't make sense at the moment. So my question is, how do we fix this market? How do we solve this problem? We think the answer is to build an exogrid. The exosphere is the highest level of our atmosphere, and the exogrid would be the highest voltage in the country at 800 kilovolts. We envisage an entire network of ultra high voltage lines, but to show you how economical this business case is, I want to focus on one line, the first line, call it Project Zero. It's from Texas to California. It travels 1,000 miles. It goes from Cathedral City to McCamey. It links the first mover in renewable energy and the second biggest population in the United States, and it goes through the best value land in the country, which is the desert. This line is going to be a 6 gigawatt connection, which means it will be has potential to be one of the biggest generators in the state of Texas. That said, for the majority of the time, it'll operate under 250 megavolts. It uses DC transmission, which means that as there are no eddy currents that you get in alternating current transmission, you're only looking at ohmic resistance. For an AC system of the same cost, the losses will be over 10%. And the wire is made of mass impregnated cable with an oil resin insulator. Those are very technical characteristics, but what do these mean from a business sense? It means that it can move more power at lower cost using proven technology. You might well ask, what is the cost? And there's going to be a big number on this slide. Just let me talk through it for a bit. I assure you the revenue will make up for it. We talked to engineering experts from a company called EnergyVault. The engineering costs will be of designing line commuter converter stations on either end and going through the regulatory process of becoming a market participant in ERCOT, the Texas grid, and CAISO, the Californian grid. The line costs were based on the USDA land value summary. It crosses 4 states. There is some tribal land in between, which is why there is a budget to reroute around or to bury if that is preferable. The most appropriate land is right on the US-Mexico border. And finally, the biggest cost is the actual construction of the cabling. For this, we looked at the research of Professor Christopher Humbert of the European Energy Center. He did a lot of work on a planned project called EnergyTech, which is stalled in Europe. Altogether, these costs are about $2.5 million. You might think with a figure like that, you might see exactly why the project in Europe is stalled. But we've got 2 advantages that they do not have over there, and why suddenly in these times a DC project of this nature will make sense. Firstly, it's no one could have envisaged how much free energy there is currently in California. Those 2.5 terawatt hours are free wasted energy. And secondly, no one could, unlike in Europe, we've got a very high peak in Texas around air conditioning, which leads us to talk about revenue. This set of blue bars at the top is the price of energy in the day-ahead market in Texas. See how it troughs out in the middle of the day, and see how it peaks during the 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock air conditioning window. Below is the solar energy in Texas. See how it peaks at 12 o'clock. I'm now going to make a tiny little difference, and the times are going to change to Pacific Coast time. Now you'll see the hump in Texas a little bit earlier, and you'll see the curtailment from California is still around 12 o'clock. You might wonder what that small difference of only 2 hours can make. And we can tell you exactly, because both of these grids publish all of their information. So we can say not an estimate or a forecast, but we can look last year and tell exactly what would have happened if you took all the curtailments at the moment that they happened, brought them across the desert, lost 3% along the way, and sold them at the market rate. And that figure is $64 a megawatt and 144 million in a year. And that is only the revenue that will happen in the first year. Now some of the huge investment makes sense.
Hey, Harry, just real quick, you have 1 more minute.
Cool. Now some of the finances make sense. We can predict the value of the megawatt hour, and we can predict the megawatt hours we will sell and how they will increase. And that gives a project an IRR of 14% and a net present value after costs of 2.8 billion, a very attractive deal. We think about the market impacts. Well, this will increase the payback of renewables that are already there, reduce the impact on society of having to pay maybe 3.4 billion in storage over the course of the year, and should reduce the cost of building solar farms because it allows solar farms close to the line to save on inverters. But the impacts that we care about are the climate impacts. This will push us away from less sustainable mining practices. More solar installations will be built, which means more solar energy will be used, and it'll push 900,000 tons of CO2 off in the first year. This is my final slide. I just want to leave you with the reasons why EcoGrid can succeed. Firstly, the market validation. With this product, there's no need to advertise, to communicate around, to educate consumers. And there are reams of data show minute to minute that people need this. Secondly, the payback. It's hard to predict how the world will be in 50 years. But as long as there are people in Texas and sunshine in California, this will continue to make money. Finally, the carbon savings. This reduces emissions because fundamental problem of renewables is time. The time in which energy is supplied does not meet the time in which it is demanded. This can move gigawatts of power to a better time. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Harry. Let's go ahead and start with Jordan. Jordan, if you're not ready, maybe Carrie can go instead. I see Carrie has been.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had trouble getting off mute. Oh, go for it, Carrie.
Go ahead, Jordan.
Yeah, so I really love the focus on transmission, critical climate solution that does not get enough airtime. So thanks so much for that. I'm curious if you could speak a little bit to your land strategy, how you would propose to lease land requisite to build the line between California and Texas.
So the costs that are in that 2.5 billion is to actually buy the land. And that's based off the value of it last year in the USDA summary. So we can be fairly confident of those prices. As I said, the cheapest route is right on the US-Mexico border. And we do foresee problems in buying land, which is why we've put in the budget some extra miles, shall we say, to reroute around if there are particular problems along the way. But yeah, we would plan to buy the land rather than lease it. If it were cheaper to lease it, then that figure of 2.5 billion goes down and the value of the transmission remains the same. So you could see a higher net present value if leasing was a better option.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I was just going to add that absolutely transmission is very much needed. It's a battle we're taking on every day in Illinois with the 2 RTOs we're in. So I'm really grateful that you're focused on this issue. My questions do touch on the siting aspect. You're going through 4 states and you talk about buying the land, but there's that siting evaluation. So you'd have to go through 4 PUCs to get siting approval with probably very different politics and different dynamics. And so I don't know if you've accounted for the timing of going through that process. You noted that you're basically connecting CAISO to ERCOT. These states are ISOs. They have their own ISO for a reason, and I'm not sure if you considered the interests of these 2 RTOs connecting in this way. And then, so I guess the first question is about timing. If you've thought about how long a project like this would take, because time is certainly money, and then things get more expensive the more you push it out. And the other question is, when you talk about the difference between bearing lines and above ground lines, the difference can be 7-fold. And so I don't know if your number is including the buried line or the above ground.
So I'll speak to the second one first. So the figures include a 10-fold increase for 15% of the line. If we could, and it would be the best option, if we could do it all above ground, then the cost is much closer to $1 billion. The reason we wanted to include, we wanted to be realistic about including some underground lines, that is becoming the de facto in California because of their fire risk. So there'll be a certain stretch where there is a fire risk and where it would be safer to bury it underground. We are looking at the long-term life and value of the asset as well. And then of course we were advised that might help getting through tribal land as well. And then in your first question about joining CAISO and ERCOT, that we would not actually be joining CAISO and ERCOT. ExoGrid would be a market participant at either end, but we would buy and sell energy like any generator or like any other market participant on that grid. And that's how we'd like them to look at us. So they are not responsible for the transmission line. They do not have to supply us with energy if it does not suit them to. All they will miss out is the financial ability. So in California, they'll miss out on the ability to sell electricity if they don't do it. And in Texas, they'll miss out on the cheap renewable electricity at the perfect moment, which is that 5 o'clock slump. As far as timing, we reckon if this was started in earnest, then the hardest bit would be the regulation, which we reckon would take a year, and securing the finance. The actual construction, because it's a long enough line that could be constructed at several parts continuously, could be shorter and could be 9 months. And on that, there is a great advantage of building in the desert, where unlike other parts of the country, you don't have to wait for inclement weather to pass. So there are actually advantages there as well that could shorten the timeline.
Got it. Thank you for your responses, Harry. I think that's all the time we have now for questions.
Awesome. Thank you.
So we'll go ahead and give the judges a minute to fill out their forms. But yeah, as the others have said, I definitely echo the sentiment that transmission is a gnarly problem that needs to be addressed and solved in order to get all the renewable power generation to the consumers of the power. So it's a good thing that we have people working on that. Yeah, so next up we have GoLeaf. Seems like
Cathal,
if I'm saying it correctly.
Cathal, yep. Let me know when you can see my screen.
Yep, we can see your screen. Let's go ahead and give the judges just a little bit more time to fill out their scores. and then we can get started. All right, yeah, let's go ahead and get started.
Great. So hello, everyone. My name is Cathal Canavan. Today I'm calling from the University of Notre Dame, and I'll be presenting on behalf of GoLeaf, a battery startup producing ultra-high power density supercapacitors made with graphene. GoLeaf is based out of the National Research Lab Aragon in Chicago, and we've been taking part in the Chain Reactions Innovations program. If we want to electrify our economy, batteries alone won't be enough, and batteries come with their own challenges. There are many applications that require high power density.
Oh, real quick, Cathal, we're not seeing a full screen of your presentation.
Let me see.
Like your browser. Yep, perfect. Go.
Okay, perfect. So there's many applications that require high power density, fast charging and discharging cycles, such as transportation and power grid stabilization. That's where supercapacitors come in. Supercapacitors are high energy storage devices that can deliver energy 10 times quicker than battery technologies. They're often used in tandem with batteries, but the main reason supercapacitors haven't been more widely deployed is because the current supercapacitors on the market don't have a high enough power density. They're often very costly, and like batteries, when they're made with lithium, there's a high environmental impact from mining and producing batteries with lithium. So at GoLeaf, we are working to solve the downfalls with current supercapacitors on the market. We are working to build an ultra high power density supercapacitor produced from carbon waste. At GoLeaf, we have invented and patented a production process to make graphene oxide from carbon waste such as petroleum coke and tires. Because of our in-house graphene production process, we can then produce graphene supercapacitors that are high power density, low cost, and more eco-friendly than any other supercapacitors on the market. Our supercapacitor has more than double the power density than the leading supercapacitor on the market. We can also increase the operating temperature of our supercapacitors. This means we can operate our supercapacitors at higher voltage, which in turn leads to a higher energy density. Our key markets. Our initial beachhead market will be grid stabilization. In recent years, we've seen more natural disasters. There's been more power outages, and this has highlighted how fragile our grid infrastructure is. Currently, when we have an outage, we don't have enough capability to get power back to citizens quick enough, so we need more affordable solutions to restore power. This is where supercapacitors come in. With renewable energies producing more of our power and power being stored in batteries, data centers requiring more and more power, this puts pressure on our grids, and batteries can't store enough power and can't output enough power fast enough to deal with data centers requiring more power and dealing with outages from natural disasters. We believe our supercapacitors can solve key problems in grid stabilization, but going forward, a larger market that we will want to tap into more is large-scale electric vehicles such as trucks and buses. Trucks and buses will require very large batteries to power them, and this will put significant strain on the battery because of the weight of the vehicle. Due to batteries heating up, this puts significant load on the battery, and adding thermal management systems adds a significant cost. Using supercapacitors to take peak load off batteries prevent batteries from heating up, but it also increases the lifespan of the battery. In large-scale electric vehicles, supercapacitors can be used in regenerative braking systems, and most importantly, in acceleration from stop to go. This is where the battery load is highest. We believe the global supercapacitor market is growing rapidly. The CAGR that we have seen is 27.5%. The total addressable market is 14.3 billion. We believe our SAM is focused here in the US, specifically looking at grid stabilization and large-scale electrical vehicles of 7 billion. We believe by 2027, we can capture 24 million in revenue selling our supercapacitors. We have conducted more than 150 customer development interviews across a wide range of segments and applications for supercapacitors. Where we have found most traction is in grid stabilization and preventing or providing backup storage. We have been talking to Power Secure, who build modular grids, and they're interested in using our supercapacitors for when peak load kicks in or they have a power outage. And we have also received a letter of intent from a large-scale solar farm who want to use our supercapacitor in partnership with their batteries to kick in whenever peak load is highest. Our competition, there is other people on the market producing supercapacitors, but we believe with our current technology, we will be able to provide a high power density supercapacitor at a lower kilowatt hour cost than competitors on the market. We have achieved a high power density at the prototype stage, but once we optimize our material and tightly package cells, both the power and energy density of our battery will increase further. We believe we're going to be in the top right-hand corner of this compared to other supercapacitor manufacturers. This is our deployment and development timeline. Later this year, we're hoping to raise a seed round of 3.5 million. This is to help scale up our graphene production process and continue testing and development of our supercapacitor battery. Our supercapacitor battery is currently patent pending, but our graphene production process has been patented. In 2025, we want to raise a Series A of 15.5 million, and this will be to roll out commercial production of our supercapacitors. Our business model utilizes strategic partnerships and licenseship agreements. We want to work with as many companies who are interested in using our supercapacitors, and we have started many conversations with companies who would be interested in piloting and paid piloting our technologies. Our role in the energy transition is to increase the penetration of renewable energies by providing reliable and efficient grid storage solutions. We believe we also have an important role to play with electric vehicles in ensuring that battery technologies can go further and last longer and reduce the environmental impact. Thank you very much for listening to my presentation, and I welcome any questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Keito.
Thanks, Keiko. I actually have 3 questions, so I'll just ask them quickly. How many amps does it deliver in instant power? That's my first question. Second, you said it can work with the EV vehicle. So is it compatible with like lead acid battery systems? And my third is, what is the useful life of the capacitor?
So the first question in terms of amps, I actually don't have a figure off the top of my head. I think our amps is between 20 to 45 amps, but I actually don't know that figure. In terms of EV compatibility, from talking to EV battery providers, it really depends on the system. We can produce supercapacitors at different sizes. The patented one that we're currently working on, our patent pending one, has 18 cells. So this one can integrate with most normal sized electric vehicles. But then when we start looking at larger electric vehicles, we would have to change our system design. And in terms of the useful lifespan of our supercapacitor has an infinite lifespan. Technically, it can be charged and discharged as many times as possible. So this accounts for a large reason why supercapacitors, when partnered with batteries, are so much better for the environment, because they can be used indefinitely.
Thank you.
You mentioned that your graphene manufacturing process reduces costs by 90%. Can you speak to what innovations in that process you're pursuing to achieve those levels of cost reduction?
So one of the key ways is we start with a very carbon rich source. So by starting with petroleum coke, it's a lot easier to extract carbon to then make graphene and graphene oxide. A lot of the production costs with producing graphene, it comes from the energy intensive nature. And we have been able to develop a proprietary way to create graphene oxide using a lot less energy intensiveness. And some of the chemicals used in different exfoliation methods are also very harmful, but also expensive. And we have been able to find a way to work around that and reduce costs. But an additional revenue stream also kicks in to offset costs. Oil refineries may pay us to process their petroleum coke into like a more high value product. And they're really happy to get rid of their petroleum coke for a better than market price, because at the moment it's just being sold to burn, and that also has an environmental impact.
Awesome. Thank you for the presentation and answers. All right, next up we have Hydra Energy. Awesome, thank you. And let's give the judges about 30 seconds to fill out their forms. Already getting started here.
Do you want to turn? Oh, yeah. Okay.
All right, we can see your screen and we can hear you, so.
Awesome.
We're good.
Thank you so much for having us here today. I'm Annie Yang.
And I'm Layla McDermott.
And we're Hydra Energy Storage Solutions. As the share of renewable energy sources in electricity production continues to grow, utility providers and governments alike are faced with the challenge of preparing the grid for the energy transition. To accommodate for the intermittent generation of renewables, our grid needs resilience and flexibility. This means more ancillary services for load shifting and peak shaving. Both fast and slow regulation response, illustrated in this graph, are necessary for grid stability. Hybridized energy storage systems bring the best of both worlds. They combine and coordinate different components to provide both response types. Large-scale hydropower plants, solar and wind have all found success in hybridized storage. However, hybrid energy storage systems are also difficult to manage, especially for smaller scale operators. In fact, studies have shown that the inefficient application of hybrid energy storage components may result in gross losses. As a result, smaller units like run-of-river dams and hydro facilities with licensing or infrastructural limitations on ramping tend to avoid hybridization despite its advantages. As such, they are unable to participate in the fast frequency regulation market.
That's where we come in. In collaboration with Idaho National Laboratory, we present Hydra Energy Storage Solutions, a novel architecture for energy management. Our software optimizes regulation response by decomposing regulation signals using variational mode decomposition. Hydra software can then be bundled with energy storage hardware, like batteries, to increase energy storage capacity for generators that lack pre-existing capabilities. This integration creates a virtual reservoir that small-scale generators can draw on to contribute to grid stability and resilience, reduce wear on hydropower components, improve ramp times, and increase overall system efficiency. Though our primary product is our software, we will continue to forge key relationships with our customers and other stakeholders to optimize hybridization and increase revenue. We will act as intermediaries in interconnection agreements between generators and utility providers in the fast frequency regulation market. And we will also perform routine software checks and maintenance services to assess the energy efficiency and stability of the now hybridized energy system.
Hydra software promotes inclusion by allowing operators of smaller generators to play a role in the energy transition through increased access to the regulation market. Furthermore, our solution supports local resiliency by making hybridization feasible and economical for microgrid generators. Small-scale hydro benefits underserved rural communities, and when hybridized, would be able to black start the grid to keep hospitals and other emergency services running in times of crisis. Our software not only increases revenue for our customers, but also decreases the risk faced by these operators through error compensation and sensitivity analysis.
While Hydra is an energy management software first and foremost, and it can be adapted to multiple kinds of dispatchable generators, we plan to first sell to hydropower operators. In the dispatchable generation market, hydropower is the cheapest and most mature technology, making up almost 93% of all energy storage capacity in the United States. Looking at hydropower, about half of total US hydroelectricity generation is concentrated in the states of Washington, California, and Oregon. In addition to utility-scale hydropower generation, these areas have over 2,000 small-scale hydropower plants. With regard to the competitive landscape, Hydra is uniquely situated at the nexus of the following three components: energy storage hardware, energy management software, and small-scale hydropower. There are companies for each of these three elements that are industry disruptors in their own right, but none of them possess all three characteristics. Even when looking at other hybridized hydropower companies, which have already received up to $8 million in funding from the federal government, the legitimacy of hybridized hydropower can be seen through the success of these companies, but hydro distinguishes itself as a technology that, first and foremost, benefits operators of small-scale hydro.
Simulations predict our software to increase the value of hydropower-based hybrid energy storage systems by 25%. Though we are still investigating initial installation costs, researchers at the Idaho National Laboratory predict it to be comparable to co-located solar and wind systems of similar capacity. Drawing from that, we estimate our customers' break-even levelized cost of energy to be around $115 per kilowatt hour. Based on simulations, we estimate an LCOE of around $97.5 per kilowatt hour for hybridized hydropower. We plan to earn roughly 25% of our revenue from initial licensing fees and 75% from monthly use and regulation fees, which will be dependent on the specific generator's capacity. Here are our preliminary income projections. Because we are offering primarily a software, initial costs are low, as we will not be manufacturing any hardware ourselves. Our monthly licensing fee will be based on a percentage of the savings that our software provides. Do note that these projections show figures only from small-scale hydropower. We expect much higher revenue potential in the long term as we expand our customer base to other generator types. Hydro software is easy to install, cheap to operate, and extremely scalable.
We care most about bringing this technology to where it will have the most use and the most impact. While our software is asset type agnostic, meaning it can be adapted to a number of applications beyond hydropower, starting with hydropower and focusing specifically on small-scale hydro will give us the most immediate benefit in market penetration. Success for us means entering into partnerships with small-scale hydropower operators, aiming for 50% market penetration of the contiguous Pacific in the next decade. The technology has two proven use cases, one with PJM and one with Idaho Falls Power, that specifically tested our proposed architecture with hydropower generators. However, in order to advance our technology from phase 1 of private R&D to phase 2, which will include commercialized deployment and licensing, our go-to-market strategy relies on a couple of key factors. In addition to EnergyTech Up, we are looking to opportunities provided through SBIR and SDTR grants at the DOE, funding from the Water Power Technology Office, and taxes and various tax incentives.
So a little bit more about us. Layla and I are both undergraduates at the University of Chicago.
I'm an anthropology and digital studies major interested in advancing equity in the digital space during the energy transition. Our software will allow small-scale hydropower operators the digital upgrade they need to survive and thrive in the rapidly evolving U.S. electricity market.
And I'm studying urban and environmental studies. I've worked in sustainable agriculture, done research on water infrastructure, and studied domestic energy policy. I'm most fascinated by the intersection between infrastructure, consumption, and behavior. I'm a huge city nerd and a massive fan of code design. What excites me most about hydro software is its potential to transform local microgrids.
And lastly, our advisor is Idaho National Laboratory's Dr. Shafiul Alam, the primary researcher and developer of hydro software technology. That brings us to the end of our presentation. Thank you so much again for listening and for your consideration. We'd like to open the floor to questions.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Awesome pitch. All right, judges, let's start with Carrie.
Hi, really great presentation. And it sounds like you've thought through and know a lot about energy markets, which is wonderful and important for your product. I think it's really interesting at the time of this FERC Order 2222, we're trying to take these distributed energy resources and using them for the wholesale market. It sounds kind of like what you're trying to do. My question is, you talked about a PJM use case, and it looks like you're trying to start with hydro, and I saw a picture of California. So do you plan for your product to be able to engage in an already formed CAISO market, or would you act as kind of like a localized distributed service operator? Would you kind of run your own market, or is there a market that exists that you could plug in, or would there need to be changes to a market that exists?
Absolutely, Carrie, that's a great question. Thank you, and I'll take that question. Obviously, the regional variation as you go throughout the entire United States, especially with regard to these sort of ISO, RTO makeups, can really increase the efficacy of whatever technology you're introducing into the market. Ideally, what we are proposing, because our product is an energy management software primarily, we would be introducing this into an already existing market. So much like the first example that you gave of an existing small scale hydropower generator market that exists in CAISO. We did have a use case in PJM, given the capacity for small scale hydro in California. I mean, in the state of California alone, there's a pretty significant amount of both private and public small scale hydro. So I think we would start there, but we certainly are not limited to those ISOs and RTOs.
Right, and we're really looking at ourselves as sort of like the intermediaries between these smaller scale operators and larger networks for frequency regulation.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I think that's all the time we have for questions, but thank you for the presentation and your responses.
Thank you.
All right, great. So next up we have OU Pros, I think is the name of the pitch, though I may have that wrong.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Awesome. All right, let's give the judges just a little bit of time here, and then I'll let you know when you can get started.
Yeah, I'm sharing.
Yeah, if you want to make your presentation full screen, feel free. And yeah, you can go ahead and get started.
All right. Hello, our team from Oakland University will be presenting on energy efficient desalination that uses osmotic processes to reduce costs. My name is Dakota Zahler, and I'm an undergraduate economics student at Oakland.
Hello, and I'm Sanjana. I'm a PhD candidate in mechanical engineering.
So we're going to begin by analyzing the desalination industry, which is currently a $9.63 billion industry that has projected growth of 9% over the next 7 years. And the segment within that we'll be targeting is reverse osmosis desalination technology, which makes up 69% of the market and also has the lowest cost of all the other desalination processes. The problem that our products will be addressing is the need for sustainable desalination, which becomes more relevant as water scarcity becomes more of an issue, with 90% of our current water supply being utilized by 2050. And then additionally, the fresh water has to be provided in a manner that is both good for the environment and affordable. So our product aims to solve both of these issues by lowering the energy costs and diluting the brine that is often a harmful byproduct of reverse osmosis desalination.
And the solution is using a process called pressure retarded osmosis with reverse osmosis. So what is PRO? In PRO, we have a low salt concentration solution called feed and a high salt concentration solution called raw. And both are separated by a semi-permeable membrane. The water flux is from feed to draw, and the draw side is pressurized. Because of this, the mechanical energy is generated. In a ROPRO process, the brine from reverse osmosis goes to PRO unit as the draw side, and it gets diluted in the process where mechanical energy is produced, and this energy produced is transferred to the reverse osmosis feed using an energy recovery device. So the motivation to implement ROPRO is that the brine dilution costs are about 5 times more than the actual RO process. And when PRO is used with RO, the brine dilution costs are significantly reduced, and also electric energy costs are reduced. And here you can see that the levelized cost of energy for PRO reduces as the power density of PRO increases. Here is another motivation. So because of the reduced brine dilution costs as well as the reduced electric costs, an RO plant can save almost $65,000 per year. So we do have a rough estimate of the capital associated with a PRO bench scale unit. It's about $30,000, but still this is a huge saving for an RO plant because it's yearly saving. And our product is a solution to improve the pressure retarded osmosis process performance using a maximum power point tracking controller. And here is our controller. It is able to control the 3 variables that are very important. That is the feed side flow rate, the draw side flow rate, and also the applied pressure on the draw side. And the goal of this controller is to reach a point where the net power is maximum. Here is how our algorithm works. So each of the variable is controlled and it is incremented from one time step to the other time step. And at each increment, the net power is calculated and compared with the previous step. And it will look for the power to keep increasing, and the increment is in the direction where the net power keeps increasing. And this process continues until the net power reaches the maximum point, and after that, all the variables oscillate around the maximum power point. So our competitors are the rest of the algorithms that are in the market. We have a competitive advantage over all of them. That is, they do not control all the three variables. They only control the applied pressure. And whereas there are other advantages we have. One of it is patented algorithm. We also can control a lot more variables, and our algorithm can be applied to other technologies. For example, it can be applied to reverse osmosis to find the minimum energy point.
So the two revenue streams that we would like to explore with the MPPT algorithm are licensing agreements and design services. We're choosing licensing agreements because it eliminates much of the overhead costs and allows us to leverage our strengths as an organization, the research and development of these algorithms. And then alternatively, we could serve as a design agency for implementing MPPT systems and use our technology to optimize other renewable power systems, such as Sanjana said. And then to the right is a map of RO plant locations in the US. And so our 5-year implementation plan begins in year 1, where we currently are, in building our bench test system of a MPPT of RO system, excuse me. And then in years 2 through 4, we're hoping to work with existing industry partners to implement our technology at scale. And then in years 5+, we're going to be using feedback from these projects to constantly implement changes and identify bottlenecks within the system. And then simultaneously, we'll conduct market research to see if there's a need for an optimization algorithm for reverse osmosis systems so that we can pair them with our PRO optimized system and have a complete holistic system. So some of the industry connections we're already working with, the main one is Alicat, because their software allows us to run our algorithm in real time and collect data. And then below are also some desalination and research organizations that have listened to our idea and given us positive feedback. And then finally, in terms of the holistic outcomes and potential impact that our technology would have on our community, first, it's the reduced energy consumption. Because we're reducing the amount of electrical energy consumption with the PRO implementation, we're also reducing the carbon emissions that would be typically coming from electrical energy, which is highlighted in yellow and is a huge driver in terms of CO2 emissions. And then finally, we will also be diluting the brine that is typically a byproduct of reverse osmosis in a manner that's cheaper, as well as means that there's no harmful effects on the marine life and the soil that's around it. And then finally, we'd like to conclude by mentioning our other team members that weren't here to present and our academic advisor, and then open the floor up to questions.
Awesome, thank you. Judges, does anyone want to go first? Karen.
Sure, thank you. When you think about this huge topic of desalination and what we're all going to need depending on where people live, I'd love to get your perspectives on your first customers and exactly who they would be and how quickly they would be able to actually provide the revenue streams you're looking for.
You can take it.
Okay, so I think we are looking at the reverse osmosis plants as the first customers, and we'll be pitching our algorithm to them. Does it answer the first part of your question?
Yes, thanks.
Yeah.
And then in terms of implementation, so we're currently at bench scale, and we're hoping to work with our partners in terms of the supply chain of our products, the PRO system, to work to get that to a commercial scale in the next 2 to 3 years.
Great, thank you. I think we have time for one more question if judges have any more. Guess not, but thank you for your time and your presentation today.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
All right, so we are on to our last presentation for this afternoon from WatchShift. We'll go ahead and give the judges a little bit of time here, but thank you for pulling it up. I'll let you know when to get started. All right, Will, you can go ahead and get started. We see your slide.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. My name is Will. I'm the founder of WatchShift. We're doing for demand management what Stripe did for payments. So demand management is urgently needed. Solar and wind are the cheapest forms of electricity per kilowatt, but you can't tell the sun when to shine or the wind when to blow. It lets you shift from times with peak times to off-peak times. I'm going fast because I think you all know this. I think I'll just highlight a few things. You're increasing reliability and also providing revenue streams to DERs, which it sort of has some compounding effects. Transmission and storage are also part of the solution, but demand management is lowest cost and fastest to deploy. So it's, I think, a great short-term thing to be pounding on and making sure is very effective out there. I'm not the only one who thinks this way. Utilities, grid regulators, and operators are increasingly creating incentive schemes for demand management. There's sort of 5 categories at the top have been growing the last 8 or 10 years. This stuff has been starting to grow. Today already, with existing installed smart thermostats in the US, with existing incentive schemes, there's $4 billion in value to be unlocked. And then it's also growing quickly. Just in California, 3 million people pushed on the time of use plans in the most recent year with EIA data. And that's almost $200 million in incentive value that's available there. With all this value, there are a lot of businesses that are interested in managing devices into optimizing for incentive schemes for various reasons, but focused on they get to generate revenue, they get to create new value for customers, it can save them operational costs. The problem that I'm focused on is one that I encountered when I was the product manager optimizing thermostats for just time of use plans or dynamic pricing plans. Just doing that for a couple states took years and was super, super painful, both in terms of upfront expenditures and also recurring maintenance of this. And that challenge is what we're seeking to solve. It's not just me or LM.com that had this issue. Through customer discovery, we found a lot of other smaller and big companies, but we think these startups are great early customers for solving this problem. Like Blip had to change their go-to-market strategy, and Aquata was actually offering to pay us money for this. Even though we don't need to charge them money, we get to make them revenue. And FERC DOE has a report agreeing that demand management is underutilized due to implementation barriers. The thing that's complicated is the variety of geographies and incentive schemes that overlap. What we can do is we can take these different incentive schemes and their complexities, and they're all trying to say the same thing, and take all the things they're trying to say and put a single API out that gives the price signal, high price, low price, peak time, off peak time, that all of these devices can align with, and that makes this really simple. So we're building this software for thermostats and other devices to optimize against all incentive schemes at once with a really simple option. Just the companies that I've had the opportunity to work with that I know a good more about than the average person and can say would want this, and there's lots of others out there that can benefit from this with their devices or on their platform, going and that's taking our API, integrating with their devices, and going and taking that to consumers into their homes. This is it's, as I've said, it's complicated because you have the overlapping ISO RTO districts, utility districts, and like what is now possible to do that wasn't possible before is we can start with a single geography and make a direct consumer app that will allow us to gradually move towards a useful product for B2B2C customers that I've highlighted earlier. Now that LEAP is here and makes it much easier to access wholesale markets, we can start with just a couple of incentive schemes and a couple of geographies. And now that the Smart Home Interoperability Protocol Matter launched in late fall of 2022, we can utilize that to directly access DERs in the home through the consumer while we're building up this backend logic and for incentive schemes across geographies that will be useful to our B2B2C customers. Yep. in the B2C market, we're able to offer a more value for the customer, more with simpler interactions than OhmConnect or Google Nest or anybody else out there, because of the changes in incentive schemes, the way that their business models have been built over time for legacies, and the ability to go direct to consumer at a different point in the value stack. There's a lot of value here. For a thermostat in California, we're looking at many hundreds of dollars a year in customer value. Additionally, we don't need the consumer's credit card information or anything like that. We can collect directly from VPPs, wholesale markets, and generate our revenue that way, which is substantial. All of this opportunity grows quickly as we have as we integrate more incentive schemes, more device types over time. I've spent a long time in this space as a founder and then as a product manager. I've also built mobile apps before, which is relevant to putting out our MVP. And I'm working with a bunch of great folks at the University of Chicago to help put this together. We've done a bunch of customer discovery. We're about 80% of this MVP mobile app being built. We've already done most of it, but there's a little bit left before we start our beta. Speaking of which, we have our website up where we're collecting a wait list and starting to seeking out those first beta customers, looking ahead to expanding on that and going through NVC this spring, where we can grow on this and really begin shifting watts for folks out there. Thanks so much, and I'd be thrilled to answer any questions.
Great, thank you for the pitch. Let's go ahead and start with Jordan.
Thanks so much for the pitch. And yeah, this is a really important problem. So glad to hear you're working on it. My question is, are you focusing more on wholesale market participation related to FERC Order 2222 that was mentioned earlier, or is this more tariff optimization and demand response at the utility level? And if it's the latter, can you speak to your approach to collect utility data?
Yeah, for sure. I have worked deeply in space. I think that the idea is to pull these things together, like all of them, right? There's different companies that are working in each of the spaces, right? You have like Genability, which is what I use Alarm.com to pull in tariff data. You have Genability, which is now owned by Arcadia. You have NRL's URDB. You have all these different tariff data sources that you can start with and start optimizing against. Really, one of the hearts of the problem is that data is messy and needs a lot of processing in order to actually optimize against. It's kind of a mess. So it's pairing that together with Leap, making it really easy to do virtual power plant wholesale market access as the first starting point, and then pulling in other incentive schemes as well. So sort of layering those all together. But yeah, I think the innovation is partly the business model of tying together the time of use pricing and the wholesale market in this way, where you can keep more of the value. And then going further down the path than Genability or NREL URDB or anybody else in terms of making it really easy to align with complicated tariff systems.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
And we've got time for one more question.
Well, you mentioned all these partners like Eaton and Square D. Most of them have their own smart system for some type of like demand response, or at least like collect data. Like Eaton has that like smart circuit breaker. I saw Span.io on your website as well. So how do you plan to like both compete with them and sort of like want to partner up with them for your product?
Yeah, so this is a list of people we think are great partners for us, like actual potential channel partners and customers. So like they have all of these companies up here have or control energy hardware. And so what we're offering for them is a way to really simply adjust their business model to save a lot of money on energy bills if they own those, or save their customers' energy bills, while also generating more recurring revenue than they can with existing DERMS providers and like AutoGrid or Energy Hub or one of those folks. So it's giving them an easier way to take advantage of the energy hardware they have out there and create more value from their load panels or their whatever kinds of devices they have in the field already.
Just one follow-up. Have you had dialogues with them yet, like with Eaton, Square D, like one of these hardware manufacturers, ABB, Siemens?
Yeah, I talked to Span this fall. I've previously like worked with Schneider and Leventhal and Eaton on like in previous jobs, but I talked to Span about this, and that kind of their take was, you know, they're up and coming, they're putting in a lot of load panels, and that they see the value of this and they see the need to optimize against all these incentive schemes, and they're not super focused on that because like Span's current primary value case is preventing the need for service upgrades, and so they're just really focused on leveraging the service upgrade side of their business and getting a lot of devices installed, and then they see this as a way to capture a lot of value later. So it was sort of a that was one conversation we had. You know, I've highlighted Blip and Aquanta, and I mean, obviously I talked to folks at alarm.com where I used to work about this stuff. But yeah, so to have had conversations with a bunch of these folks, and definitely like, you know, sort of was in their shoes a few years ago. So I think I understand something about what they're looking for.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
Great. Thank you, Will. I think that's all the time we have for questions today, but thank you for the presentation. So that was the last of the pitch. I want to thank everyone again for your participation and presenting to our judges. At this point, they will leave this webinar and deliberate, and in about 20 or 30 minutes, provide us with the winner for the $3,000 prize for today. So that'll be very exciting. In the meantime, there are two things coming up. One, the first thing I'd like to mention is we have a link to the student participation survey in the chat. So if all the participants could provide us feedback on, you know, this event and this program, that'd be greatly appreciated. So please go ahead and do that. And now we have Kathleen Swan here to go through a presentation regarding some of the legal and mechanic kind of logistics behind incorporating a new entity for entrepreneurs. So I think this is a very pertinent subject for you all. Feel free to drop any questions you may have in the Q&A portion of the Zoom, and after the slides, we will address as many of those as we can. Kathleen, go ahead and take it away.
Good afternoon. I will confess I've been listening to many of the pitches, and they're absolutely fabulous. So as you come along as lawyers saying, okay, now this is the tech, this is the housekeeping stuff. So I hope what I've done is tried to curate the questions that I hear most often from entrepreneurs in terms of why do they have to do something, or when do they have to do something, and do they really have to do something? So I'm hoping that this is practical and is helpful to you. So let's start with the first slide. First question we often get is, I think that's the second slide. Let's go back one, please. Okay, no, let's go to the next slide. Okay, well, there's a slide that's missing. The slide that was missing was, so we'll just stay here, is that usually the first question is, well, I understand I'm going to have to form a company. Why am I going to have to form a company? Well, the reason you're going to form a company is because generally people are not going to transact business with you personally, notwithstanding the fact that they may love and adore you. They are looking for an entity that holds, that has the ability with personnel, intellectual property that the entity owns, not that you own, to transact business and enter into contracts. And so the question is, where? As you all know, companies are created by states. So you can choose any of the 50 states in which you can incorporate and form your company. But is that really what you want to do? I'm sure most of you have heard that Delaware is a preferred jurisdiction. The question is why? Delaware is a small little state that has a bunch of industry, and then it forms a lot of companies. Well, what Delaware has that's magical is the Delaware Chancery Court. And the Chancery Court is probably one of the most experienced courts that deals with entrepreneurship, securities, and corporate governance matters, the relationship between shareholders and the boards of directors, the relationship between management, etc. And so the issue becomes, you go to the Delaware as a preferred because the investors know when they have to enter into arrangements with companies They have a very clear vision about if there's a dispute, or even if there's a dispute, what is the court going to say and how is that going to be resolved? So Delaware is preferred. Delaware is not the only state, though, obviously. You can choose the state where your company is located. If you're located in Illinois, that might be an appropriate choice for your investors too. Illinois has a very well-known court in corporate governance, and its laws look very much like Delaware's. If you're out of Alaska, you can form in Alaska, but it will be more likely than not that before you, before the day is done, before your first formal investment is taken, you will be asked to convert and to become a Delaware entity. So ultimately, more likely than not, you're going to wind up in Delaware. The timing of it, when do you have to put up a company? From many of the presentations I saw, I would assume that many of you already have your companies up, but kind of it's just to underscore the when. As soon as you are having conversations with investors, people that you're going to do beta testing with, as soon as you're entering into engagements that possibly, if they go sideways, could have an adverse consequence, you should have a company up. When you have your intellectual property developed, you are going to ultimately assign that intellectual property to the company. Investors generally do not invest in companies until all intellectual property that forms the basis for what a company is doing has been assigned to the entity, the corporation, in which with which the business will be transacted. So sooner rather than later, putting up a corporation, assigning the intellectual property to it, and conducting business or conducting negotiations through that entity is going to be something you're going to want to do, especially because, and I just underscore this, if something happens where someone thinks you broke a promise to them and they think they lost a lot of money, people will file lawsuits. If you have a corporation, you can engage in any kind of dispute resolution between the corporation, not you personally, the corporation and the entity or the person that is claiming you broke your promise. However, if there is no corporation, then it is you personally that is going to be the object of the dispute and how it is resolved, which also means that if you were incorrect and you lose, it's your personal assets, your savings account, your investment accounts that can be tapped to satisfy any kind of liability. So a corporation is also in some ways an insurance policy for an entrepreneur to be sure that any liabilities that are the residual of this business activity, and building and scaling companies is a business activity, are left in the corporation and do not follow you personally for the remainder of your professional life. Qualifying to do business, where and when. Once you have formed a company, let's say in Delaware, you may not operate, you're all not moving to Delaware, I assure you. You will transact business in a state where you think of it as where your headquarters is. And because all states love the revenues generated by charging businesses that want to transact business in their state, the state in which you gather most of your employees and really find your headquarters, you will likely want to qualify to do business. Where you have employees, you will need to qualify to do business. Where you hire independent contractors, you may need to qualify to do business. The reason is that when you qualify to do business, then if there is a dispute, you have the right to go into the courts of that state and you can have the court hear your dispute. If you are not qualified in the state to transact business, and let's say an employee violates a non-compete and tries to steal your IP, you cannot go into the courts of the state in which that employee resided and get the court to enter a temporary restraining order. So number one is qualifying to do business gives you access to remedies in the event that there are issues. Number two is most secretaries of state, especially as you start to hire employees and enter into contracts, are going to determine that you are transacting business. And they're going to knock on your door and they're going to say, hey, you're here. We expect you to qualify to do business. And we expect you and we want you to pay the annual fee and we want you to file the required annual reports. Ultimately, they will find you. Lastly, if you have employees residing in a state, you are required when you have employees to indeed pay unemployment and workman's compensation. And once again, states monitor this very carefully. If you have an employee that you discharge and they toddle down to the Illinois Department of Employment Security, and the Illinois Department of Employment Security discovers that you have not, frankly, you have not been paying unemployment and taxes, they're going to knock on your door and you're going to wind up paying them and the fines and penalties that go with it. Now, many companies operate for a long period of time using independent contractors. That's a slightly different case, but that's harder and harder, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But when you have employees, you have obligations to pay into the state till to cover employees under certain circumstances, and the states monitor it. So the short of it is that once you're formed in, for my example, Delaware, where you are conducting enough business, either you have employees, customers, or you have bank accounts, so you want to have access to the courts, or you are required by state law, then you will start qualifying to do business. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Choice, what are you going to be? I've been referring in my comments to being a corporation. However, I'm sure many of you have heard about limited liability companies. Let's talk about limited liability companies. Limited liability companies are entities that are formed. They provide the kind of protection from personal liability that a corporation provides, but they do not pay taxes. Any income earned by the limited liability company is attributed to the shareholders, and then the shareholders pay taxes on an annual basis to the government as a result of the revenues generated. So when you are a limited liability company, you're in a slightly different position as an investor, because you will pay taxes whether or not the limited liability company distributes some of the revenues or not. The other thing about limited liability companies that, especially for early stage entities, I find interesting is that under a limited liability company, there is a way to disclaim all sorts of fiduciary obligations that officers and directors are generally required to honor, except for good faith and fair dealing. What that really means in outside of lawyer speak is as long as you don't intentionally lie or cheat, you have no other fiduciary obligations to the company, or to the shareholders. The direct, one of the great comparisons is a C corporation. Most publicly traded companies are C corporations. You've heard of them. They have articles of incorporation, bylaws, boards of directors, stockholders, and officers. C corporations pay tax at the C corporation level. Shareholders are only taxed when and if a dividend is made. C corporations, you cannot disclaim, officers and directors cannot disclaim fiduciary duties. There is a long, rich list of those duties and obligations that reside in the corporate codes of all states. So when you're a C corporation, you have imposed on you a series of fiduciary obligations to as you meet the obligations of being an officer or a director. All enterprises that are taking investors in will be LLCs or C corporations. If anybody comes along and suggests that you want to be an S corp, please run screaming from the room. And the simple reason for that is S corporations have they're very useful when you're opening up a mom and pop chocolate shop. However, S corporations have a number of limitations. You have a limit on the number of investors you can have, and you can only have one class of stock. There is nothing worse than an entity being formed as an S corporation, and it's ready to take in its first round of funding from an investor, but that investor wants preferred stock or a preferred membership interest, which is different from the common stock or the common membership interest that the founders would hold. S corporations, you're not allowed to have two classes of stock. So for those of you who are going to live on grants for the rest of your life, S corporations would be a possibility. But I haven't seen a company today where I think that that's a reality. So all of you will be either limited liability companies or C corporations. I will also note that I spend an awful lot of my time, even with limited liability companies, when you really go to your B or C round, the investors look at the lawyers and say, we want them converted, which means the limited liability company by lawyer magic becomes a C corporation. Are there tax consequences to that? Absolutely. I'm not going to bother you. I'm not going to bore you with those. But it all really comes down to that more often than not, especially as you scale and take on additional investors, you will become a C corporation. I mentioned partnerships, general or limited, simply to kind of round out. It is very rare that partnerships are ever used in entrepreneurship. And so again, if someone suggests that you should be a partnership, you probably should get a second opinion. Next slide, please. Just to kind of level set to make sure we all understand how both LLCs and corporations work. Everybody, if you're a corporation, everybody has a board of directors. It's mandated by law. It may be one director, but you do have a board of directors. And the board is responsible for really the oversight and the general direction of the company. The board is also who and what appoints the officers of the company. And the officers are responsible not only to the board, but to the shareholders for running and making the company successful. And both board members and officers have fiduciary obligations, unless you're an LLC and you've disclaimed all but good faith and fair dealing. Boards of managers can be very similar. Boards of managers can also be made up of just a single manager. However, with an LLC, and this is why sometimes they're very attractive to early stage companies, managers and officers, the roles can be blended together. And you can have a manager that basically is an omnibudsman and does all things that the board would do and does all things that the officers would do. That really, though, becomes a question of how are you going to operate and what's best for the corporate governance and the understanding that you have with your co-founders. Obviously, companies have employees, full-time, part-time. One of the most often asked questions though as well, wait a minute, I really don't want to go through filing with the various states, the taxes and paying them. I'm running this on a shoestring, etc. And so I'm just hiring independent contractors. I'm going to give everybody an agreement that says you're an independent contractor. And that's fine, except the Department of Labor and the IRS, that both want their taxes paid, often has a very different idea in what we would all think would be an evolution to the gig economy. And the articles are out there, oh, we're going to a gig economy, everybody can be an independent contractor. We increasingly have states examining, do you control what the person that you are paying does? Do you tell them place, time, scope, deliverables? Don't care that you call them an independent contractor. We're going to call them an employee. And we're going to call them an employee because we want to be sure that they have the protections the state provides to employees, including but not limited to unemployment compensation. So as your company moves forward, as comforting it as it is to have an independent contractor, it is often the fact that they really are reclassified as employees, whether they're full or part-time. And under those circumstances, it's important to understand the difference and be sure that you take care of the books and records in the way that employees have to be cared for. Next slide, please. Favorite topic. And if you all haven't had these conversations, I advise a bottle of wine and a quiet place where you all sit down as founders. You've decided to found this wonderful company. Now you've got to divide it up. How big is who's going to get what piece of the pie? This is really a very personal conversation. Many of you may have already made the decisions, and this is a meaningless, but often you get entrepreneurs coming to you and the product is well developed and they haven't had the hard conversation about how much equity, what percentage of equity, just the founders, are each of the founders going to have? Are each of the founders going, are you going to issue to the founders stock? Or are you going to use a combination of stock, which is ownership, or membership interest, which is ownership in an LLC, along with options? Options are the opportunity in the future to earn additional equity based on either vesting by time or meeting certain performance metrics. These are conversations that should happen very early on. It's very difficult for an investor to come into you without knowing who owns the company and how much each stockholder or each member specifically, what percentage they have. But it does require sitting down and being very honest with with the founder team, because it's not always everybody shares equally, especially when some founders may be committing more time and resources than others. It is often people suggest or consider that rather than giving people who are early involved in the creation of a company, instead of giving them equity, they talk about phantom stock plans. This is really a topic that can take up 45 minutes in and of itself. But the short of it is that people contribute as a founder team, and but the life comes in and circumstances arise where they cannot continue. If they know that, you still may want to reward them. Once you give someone equity, you can't get it back. That means that forever and ever and ever, they own that equity. However, if what you're really trying to do is reward people who helped you, but you don't want them and they cannot make that forever and ever and ever commitment, phantom stock, a payment of some kind at a certain milestone, is another way of rewarding people who are valuable and who make early contributions to the company. The one thing you should remember is anyone who makes an early contribution or any contribution to the intellectual property of the company, and that's not just the mechanicals or the formulas or the algorithms, but it's also the strategies, the customer bases, all the soft sides of companies should sign assignments so that all that intellectual property is deposited in the company. Next slide, please. These are just a list of the documents. When you put up a company, you're going to have articles of incorporations and bylaws. You're going to have an LLC agreement. You may have an additional operating agreement. You will have an FEIN number because you are going to get a tax ID number. You will pay workers' comp and unemployment. I can say that sometimes entrepreneurs come and say, I don't have articles of incorporation. Well, you do, or else you're not a corporation. You have articles of formation if you're an LLC, and if you don't, then you're not an LLC. So this is just a checklist so that you know to have an awareness of what you will have when you have formed your entity. Next slide, please. Again, just a recommendation in terms of everyone should have a stock ledger or a membership interest ledger. This is nothing more than a listing of who owns what and what's the percentage. You should have minute books. Corporations and LLCs should keep resolutions or consents which memorialize actions taken by stockholders, actions taken by boards of directors. Everyone should have a capitalization table. You should know not only how much someone owns, but if you issue not only membership interests or stock, but you also issue warrants or options, that capitalization table should also have columns where you show when those options are exercised, how dilutive that will be to the original ownership. One of the most common surprises for entrepreneurs is that after they have issued the original shares and they've issued convertible notes, which convert into equity, and some options and some warrants, they do not realize where that leaves them on the cap table, how diluted they are. Having a capitalization table where you monitor that is critical. Stockholders and founders agreements are simply agreements that what happens if a shareholder dies, becomes disabled, or is unable to participate. As I previously commented, once you've issued equity to a stockholder, you have no right to buy it back. So if someone has a life-changing circumstance, you cannot get that stock back, but you will need to repurchase that stock so that you can replace them, so that you don't have to issue new shares to whomever is going to replace them on the founder team. That is where you need a stockholders agreement. Financial statements, even if it's QuickBooks, please do not go meet with investors and say you don't have financial statements. Even if they show zero, you still have financial statements. CNDAs, as everyone is, I'm sure, aware here, are incredibly important so that anyone who works with the company has clearly agreed not only to keep the confidential information confidential, but these often include assignments. So all of that, any intellectual property that that person has contributed is assigned to the company. Employment agreements are also something that, as you mature, management teams should think about, just so it's very clear what happens if they die, or more importantly, if they're terminated for cause or otherwise. I know we're running short on time. Next slide, please. Annually, when you run a company, whether it's an LLC or a C Corp, these are some of the things that you'll do annually. You'll annually have the shareholders take certain actions and the directors. You'll pay your franchise taxes. You'll pay your foreign entity filings. You'll file your tax returns and you'll update your bank account. Why do you do this? You do this because this is good corporate governance, but it also protects the entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs tend to sometimes blend what they do personally with what they're doing in the business. These are the things that when someone makes a claim against you personally and you want to say, oh no, you can go talk to the company, but you can't talk to me personally, that the courts will look at and say, did they have the meetings? Did they file their franchise taxes? Did they honor the requirements of being an entity, which affords the entrepreneur the protection, the liability protection that putting a corporation or an LLC up does? And these are the basics, so they should be kept in mind. Next slide. Intellectual property, none of this is going to surprise any of you. I just encourage all of you, especially, well, and you all have intellectual property for scalability, that you have thought about each of these issues, especially patents and provisional patents, and have good counsel. This will be the core to the valuations you will see in the future. Next slide, please. Preparing for the future, especially as you prepare for fundraising or even receiving grants, corporate records, term sheets, and understanding where you are in your own capital raising is critical and should be kept in mind as you move through fundraising and getting ready for your big first institutional round. And the last slide, just a couple of little comments that I share. And I've sat in the presentations where if somebody asks about your cap table, please understand dilution. Investors get very nervous when they don't think the founder team understands how much of the company they're giving away, or the company can't produce a financial statement, or one of my favorites, an investor was asking, literally was sitting there with a pen and said, well, what's your monthly cash burn? And I literally had the CFO say, well, I'm kind of like Icarus. I like to fly close to the sun. I really can't give you a number. Well, we all know how the story with Icarus wound up. Let me assure you that that investor closed his notebook and walked out the door. You got to know what your cash burn is. You may think it's ugly, but what the investors are looking for is that you have control and you understand where you are and where you're going. And that makes them feel happy that you will be careful with their money as you have been with yours. If you provide financial projections, everyone should understand it. No CEO should get up in an investor presentation and say, I really have to look at my CFO. CEO is responsible for understanding those assumptions. And obviously, all of you have a great handle on competitive landscape, an addressable market, because I've seen lots of it in your presentations. I hope these have been helpful. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to contact me. And thank you for your time. I really enjoyed seeing your presentations.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Kathleen. There's a lot of useful information in there. And yeah, some of the stories that you brought up on important pieces of information to have for investors, like we at the Evergreen team go through a lot of pitches, and it definitely is reassuring, and it's pretty easy to tell when founders have a good handle on some of these topics and when they don't. So that's definitely a big factor, especially when we invest as early as we do. We're investing in the people as much as the idea. So thank you for that. There were a few questions that I think we can quickly get through before we get through the rest of the slides and then announce the winner. Can you provide any guidance as to what founders should look for in their board of directors, like as far as how they, how large it should be for, where they are, and like what the composition of that should be between advisors, founders, and investors?
Happy to. Usually, let me work backwards because I think it's the easiest way to understand it. Boards of directors should not become a cast of thousands. A Series A round of funding, 3 to 5 directors is really, and one of them is going to be your lead investor. And it's more often than not, one of them will be your CEO, your COO, or a chief scientific officer. So if you know that you're going to have 3 to 5 at your A round, it is wise to keep under that number. So as you're doing a convertible note round, or even as you're starting to just talk about arranging for fundraising, 3 is a great number. Now, we all know that you want to have people who are supporters and cheerleaders, and they may or may not be writing checks, but they certainly are making introductions. I find to putting together an advisory board, because and some people prefer, they're great advisors. You may or may not give them equity. Many people do, but you don't have to, as long as you're clear up front. Put an advisory board together, buy them a nice dinner, and gather them once every quarter and talk about key issues. Be respectful of their time, but use them as part of your thought leadership. They do not have the liabilities that a direct, because when you put somebody on a board of directors, they too can be the subject of a disappointed investor's ire and be named in a lawsuit. I don't mean to be a lawyer and to talk about lawsuits, et cetera, because people say, well, early stage company, nobody sues. That's just not true. So it is, you want to, when you invite someone to be a formal director, remember you're asking them to take on, notwithstanding D&O and E&O insurance, you're asking them to take on liability. Mm-hmm. So sometimes thinking about an advisory board or just separate advisors. But I always keep a board under 3, or advise to keep it under 3, so that you are flexible at 3 to 5. Observers are also valuable. Many companies and investors prefer to put an observer, which is someone who is entitled to come and participate, just not vote. And that is a very valuable, you still get the intellectual input from them, but again, there's no liability.
Got it. And then one more question. Can you talk to us about the difference between the stock ledger and the cap table? They seem similar, but
they are. Well, it is an overlap.
Mm-hmm.
Stock ledger is a listing, and it's a listing from day one. Of all of you who use Carta, when you go into Carta and you start setting up, it's the first certificate or the first membership interest that was issued, all the way through when you go IPO and you all turn your certificates in. So you may have, for the first founder group, you'll have stock certificates 1 through 4. Let's say shareholder number 4 then sells his shares back to the company. That certificate gets canceled, and whoever purchases those former shares will get certificate 5, 6, 7, etc. New investors, they get 8, 9, 10. So your stock ledger is a continuum. And you you don't take anybody off of it. You only add and show how the ownership of the company is transferred. You keep it in a very accurate way, because when lawyers come in to do diligence, they're going to track you from day one to make sure that there isn't somebody out there that has that was given equity, that somebody is mistakenly left off the cap table, but they've got a stock certificate, and so they will show up at the most inopportune time, i.e. when there's money to be made, and say, none of your calculations are off. I really own 10% of the company. That's what a stock ledger is. A cap table is who owns currently. Mm-hmm. It also should show any convertible debt. It also should show if you have options, even if they haven't been issued, what percentage of the common stock is attributable to options. And that's the basic information. But a cap table that's a great cap table also will show you what happens to everyone in the event. All those options are issued and exercised. All the convertible notes are converted. And it will show you the dilutive effect of those activities. In order to make those calculations, you indeed have to make some assumptions, which you won't know when people convert and valuations. But if you make those assumptions and footnote them, it is very important to the current stockholders, current investors to understand what happens to their holdings when there's full exercise of all equity, not only stock, but options, rights, and warrants. When the whole enchilada is converted and everybody now owns stock, where they wind up in terms of an ownership interest.
Got it. Okay, thank you for that detailed explanation. And thank you for prepping the slides and going through that content with everyone. I think now we will be ready to announce our winner. So we can pull the Evergreen slides back up. We have a few quick informational resources that we want to provide some info on. And the first one being we hold, apart from our normal investment cycle, we do a few other opportunities at Evergreen. One being the DEI awards that we partner with Nicor Gas and US Bank on. The application deadline for that is March 10th, and award recipients get $25,000 from each of those programs. So there's definitely a good opportunity there. There's also a few accelerators and incubators that we work with as a part of the Heartland Climate Tech Partnership. So they're all along the greater Midwest region. You can go to that website there to find out more, to help advance your business and gain some resources that are there to, kind of limit the upfront costs that you may have to outlay to get your business off the ground. First one being Centropolis, which is up in Michigan, sorry. And the next one we have in the Heartland partnership is the Spark Innovation Center, which is in Tennessee. And I believe lastly, for the Spark Clean Tech Accelerator, the applications close May 12th, and that's for the program in the fall. And at Evergreen, we have a few upcoming events, namely some webinars on how to create a sales pipeline and conducting effective sales conversations. These are very important things for really any company, but absolutely for startups, where it's very important for early investors to see some signs of customer traction and adoption. So these are very valuable tools that can aid you on your journey. And so, yeah, lastly, we want to announce the winner for the $3,000 today. So one second, congratulations to the team at Carbon Busters. You guys have won. So like we said at the beginning, you will now be eligible to participate in the national conversation and be able to take a chance to win $50,000 for the first place winner, but also participate overall for $100,000 in total prize money. So congratulations. And I believe Ian has some bonus prize winners that he'd like to also hand out.
Thank you. Yes, some bonus prize nominees. So I was with the judges in the judging room. They want to send along their regards to all the teams. It was a really difficult decision, and a lot of teams were, scored really highly. We do have some additional nominations that don't come with a cash prize today, but it's a nomination for a opportunity for a certain technology prize, and those are $25,000 awards. So you'll be entered to win that and be matched up against some teams from other regions. So for the National Lab IP Prize, the bonus prize nominee is Supercharge. For the Carbon Dioxide Removal Prize, it's Carbon Busters. For the Grid Enhancing Technology, for the Office of Electricity, we have GridLink. For the Water Power Prize, Hydra Energy Storage. And for the Large Power Transformers Prize, GoLeaf. So those are our bonus prize nominations. We will follow up with teams to share more information as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for your participation in this webinar and the program overall. Yeah, we hope you've had a great time, and congratulations to the winners, but also congratulations to everyone to getting started on your journey for being an entrepreneur. Awesome. We love to see it. Well, everyone, hope you have a good rest of your evening and upcoming weekend. And feel free to find us on the Evergreen website for any upcoming events. Thank you.